the 17th already of 2023 in August. I hope everybody's doing well. We got a big show, amazing show of documentation, unfortunately, if that can be called amazing, of an extinction level event. And I call them amazing shows sometimes because it blows me away the level of documentation that's available. And I'm confused how the world is incapable of comprehending the significance of 80 years of fallout, but a 12-year massive pulse event known as Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. And the poll tonight was meant to articulate it. Is Fukushima nuclear reactor meltdowns, there's 4 of them, they only emit to 3, and 8 melted nuclear fuel pools. Each fuel pool had approximately 5 or 6 reactor cores that are 100 times the size of Chernobyl each. Was this the catalyst behind the extinction event we see playing out? And I'm going to introduce you to if you're not familiar with it, and I'm going to reinforce it if you are. Okay, so I always find these really difficult to put together, the preamble, because there's so much emotions that goes through your head when you're doing something like this. Well, if you're a human, of course, not if you're a journalist. So what is that big picture that would quantify a catalyst of an extinction event? And so it's quite surprising. It's just a few buildings, 4 actually in total. This is supposed to be 190 feet tall. And the last time it was 90 feet tall was on March the 15th. And I remind everybody it's a good time to like, subscribe, notify, kick the bell. And let's get after it. We got lots and lots and lots. Oh my goodness. Last night was the preamble to this show, by the way, if you're new to this subject. Okay, so you got 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools, and that's why we got that poll there to reinforce that for the rest of the night. Now, so we're going to do a preamble where I'm going to introduce you from scratch, basically, and then build it up into the current die-offs. So even if you have no knowledge about this, I'm going to have you up to speed. If you watch the entire presentation, you'll be able to make informed decisions based on facts instead of conjectures and bald-faced lies, which is what the nuclear industry is prolific at. There we go. So, the official story is these buildings didn't detonate, despite the fact this is the official picture. And to your right is reactor 3. And reactor 3, I show you what's left of it. And so they built a structure over reactor 3. But what they built it over, it doesn't physically touch it. They built it on the stump, or over the stump, because the building actually, they make a liar out of me, the building actually ejected the fuel pools and the reactor cores. And so they built this contraption off-site, brought it in, and assembled it with cranes. You can see how big each piece is. It was built off-site, designed to stand together with gravity, with no intervention, because it's a nuclear meltdown. And at the top of each of the buildings were 2 reactor what they call fuel pools, where they were storing decades of reactor cores, and they don't have a repository in Japan, let alone anywhere else worldwide. And so this is a lot of plants do this, of that particular design. America has 74 of them, exact replicas, colors and everything. It's just the writing is in a different language. And so the reactor was half full in reactor 4, by the way, and when they were changing fuel. So the building in day 1 doesn't exist anymore. So they constructed this contraption to manipulate the population. They've done the same thing with reactor 4. It doesn't actually exist, and the fuel pools and reactor cores were at the top of the building. And because these are very visible, that's why I always show it to you. But there was reactor 1 and 2 too, and there's a lot of evidence that overwhelmingly suggests the common spent fuel pool went kaput, which had decades of reactor cores from 6 reactor buildings. This was like a common fuel, hence the name common fuel pool. They put this contraption over the stump of this one and pretend it looked like that, and had people like Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldicott sell it to you, along with just this...
Prime standing is on top of what used to be reactor...
And this incredible amount of journalists. But when you actually, because you won't see these pictures anywhere else, by the way. So when you look at these 4 sides of reactor 4, you know, if you don't need to see that, because all you need to see this to know that it doesn't exist anymore. And if you see that, then you know it doesn't exist anymore, despite the fact that they're telling you they're in the fuel pool, and people like Arnie Gunnarsson, who made the assemblies.
I built, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like that anymore, Arnie. It looks like this. And you built the assemblies for the fuel pools, so you know. You were manager of that, so there's no way you don't know. Okay, so if you take reactor 3 and reactor 4 and stack them on top of each other, they're not as tall as the bottom piece. That's the bottom piece right here. The top of this is right here. And that's the rest of it. These were 190-foot buildings, 150 feet wide. So when you see that, you can really appreciate how wide they actually are, right? And how tall they are and how tall they're not. Now, officially, I'm a lawyer. And your eyes are lying to you, because the media says it doesn't, that's not the story. It doesn't actually look like that, it looks like this. So you can believe the media if you want to, but you're making a real mistake. This is an educational program. I can't educate you by confusing you and misrepresenting any facets of the story. I'm not even allowed to make a Freudian slip, actually. Or that's held against me. I'm held to a very high standards, even among my regular viewers. Like, no, Dana, you slipped up. Thank you. That's how we ended up here. And so behind, allegedly, people in paper suits are walking out of a melted Medusa. Now, what the controversy is, because you will probably never find this on your own. You'll find the fake ones, but you won't find the real ones. This is France's model of the radioactive fallout based on 30 days. And currently you're at day 20. It never goes away. So think of an invisible snowstorm that wraps the entire planet, and the snow never melts and it never stops snowing. So after 20 or 30 days, it'll be like that for millenniums, for millions of years. Okay, now pretend it's not snow and call it radiation, but it's the same amount of little specks, or you call snowflakes, we'll call isotopes. And each one of these isotopes are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. Almost the speed of light. So gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, they're falling up, but think of them as snowflakes. So there's an incredible amount and a heavy snow that never stops snowing and covers the whole planet forever. And so the problem is, it's been going on for 80 years, by the way. So all the nuclear testing was a major event for the species, the most vulnerable, the insects, the birds, the little crawlers, all the wonderful diversity, the millions of critters of species were annihilated in the 50s and 60s. And never stopped after, right? It sterilizes. So you got invisible snowstorm of radiation, energy, physical particles floating around that have their own engine. They pulse energy at the speed of light, almost the speed of light every second. So they have their own engines, where they physically are moving because they have all this energy. And even more so because they don't like gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas isotopes don't mix. And so when they hit each other, they change direction. So think of a snowstorm in close proximity, all these isotopes, when they have the energy to do this 100 feet apart, a lot of them, all of a sudden now they're in a snowstorm where they're gathered up. And they're pulsing this energy and it's changing direction. It's very subtle for the human experience. But nevertheless, the human body is trying to warn you in many different ways. And that's pure energy. Every second, try making something that pulses energy every second, almost at the speed of light, and say that it's inert, because you won't, right? It's pure energy. And on top of the gammas and alphas and betas and neutrons pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, hitting each other and changing direction, known as a braking effect, there's also another effect created by this braking effect is known as an X-ray. And when you have an invisible snowstorm that you can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or perceive it, what ends up happening is you got this X-rays going on, and everything is getting a full body X-rays. And so the human body can repair a lot of cells every day. But the insects and the worms and the stuff in your forest that breaks down the foliage and the litter and everything else can't handle it the same as you. And you'll get all kinds of, there's 1,800 diseases. It's literally the medical dictionary of diseases from the radiation. Because what happens is your body doesn't have a trigger to defend against it. Neither does insects or birds or mammals or whales or animals. We're almost through this. They don't have a defense. They don't have an autoimmune trigger that sends out the robotic army of white blood cells to repair. They send out the big, massive army of white blood cells to attack because you don't recognize it. And instead of a cut that heals after 7 days, it never heals. So for the rest of your life, you are now affected by you have less red blood cells carrying oxygen, nutrition, and more white blood cells. And this is really important when you get to the species. Now, as you start bioaccumulating, and you will, by the way, that's a 30-day model. This is 19.5 days, 468 hours from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. So you have this invisible plume covering the entire planet, pulsing energy, full body X-rays and gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays, alpha rays, from these highly active hot particles from a nuclear meltdown. They're different. The majority of it's going to be the curium isotopes. Normally you would need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium if it was in quantity. But it doesn't mean that it's innocuous or benign or harmless. I almost finished. And this is why when we talk about the species and Fukushima, which was a pulse event, because it never goes away on top of that, but it was an invisible snowstorm that we still have here. Your Geiger counters can barely perceive gamma, let alone a can't of the other really important stuff. So you do a mathematical equation, extrapolate a lot of the others, and that's now, because it's been doing this for 80 years, but this was a pulse event, this was the tipping point. And if you look back at all the hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones and mass beachings and strandings and die-offs, when you go past March 11, 2011 backwards, you don't see this. But when you come ahead from March 11, 2011, all the way up to present, that's when you see the pattern, and that's what I'm going to show you tonight. Now, there was some honest journalism. I'm not claiming that Stinkfoot or Shoe Bomber are honest, but there was some. And did you know, on my other site, I had a video, kicked the shit out of him, by the way, dear Charlie. And I got a message, Dana, I tried to message you, would you take down Thunderfoot, we call Stinkfoot, video, if he agrees to take down yours? He's my friend. He's pretty upset and hurt. He says you attacked him first, and he wants a trucer. And that's probably him himself, right? That creature actually has no human attributes whatsoever. Away we go. So now you basically, it's still coming, and it's going to pick up speed on top of it. We got 1,300 clicks to get through from here on out, so strap yourselves in and hang on tight, and we get busy here. Alaska, by the way, you can call in, text at 709, but don't stay on the phone too long, or not, I don't give a shit. We'll keep going until it's done. 709-589-4406. You can also text in Canada and United States. Here we go. So now we're going to do another preamble. There's the preamble. Alaska adds krill mussels to the list of unusual marine deaths. Well, you got to do that everywhere now. The mussels are gone from the tidal zone from most places. The Bikini Atoll had 1,000 times radiation of Chernobyl decades after the nuclear testing. In other words, it never goes away. But in 2019 was a study that the radiation exclusion zone was over 1 million square miles, kilometers, 1 million square kilometers. Okay, so let's jump into the unusual mortality events we've been studying and documenting, and we've done a lot of research expedition. We'll show you a little tiny bit of that coming up in a bit. So 2017, 2019, minke whale unusual mortality event. And 2016, 2019, a humpback whale. It wasn't just pilot whales. In 2019, the gray whale unusual mortality event, which is over 10,000 dead whales since 2019 of the gray whales. And 2017, 2019, North Atlantic gray whale, well, there's quite a few missing. I just showed you the mussels is one of them. The killer whales also have an unusual mortality event, and particularly for the babies, and they're showing up emaciated. Endangered killer whales make an appearance in Monterey Bay. The matriarch of the well-known orca family is starving to death, emaciated, what they call a peanut head. And they're very important to the health of the species because they're bioaccumulating. The estimates were 1,000 becquerels a kilogram by now. Another adult southern resident killer whale in her calf found in poor health, also known as emaciated, and severe emaciated, known as peanut head. A significant loss of fat and blubber around the head. No, the whole body, it doesn't just stop there. Scientists are shocked as the fishery collapses along the west coast. I was on a research expedition at that time. It's the worst we've seen. They're starving, death rates skyrocketing, no babies born, fish stocks at all-time low. Alaska's seabird die-off continues for another summer. That's 2018, where they have massive mortality events, and nobody ever mentioned the word tritium, or nobody ever mentioned the word avian influenza. And there was over 1.4 million of the common murres who dive 900 feet all day and feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill and everything else. But at the same time, there was the Cassini-auklets, and there was about 1 million of them showed up dead at the same time. Now, I was on research expeditions as this was happening in this area, by the way. And the Cassini-auklets eat the microscopic food chain. So you had two different spectrums of the food chain, and they had one thing in common. They were all emaciated. No muscle mass left on top of it. Seabirds have been found emaciated and starved. And it wasn't just these birds. There was the storm petrels, the fulmars, the shearwaters, the kittiwakes. There's another 10,000, 15,000 just washed up. We'll cover that in a bit. Auklets and puffins. So these die-offs that they're now trying to conflate, and fraudulently I'll add, with avian influenza have a serious precedence post-Fukushima that you should be aware of. So does a bear just eat salmon? Because 90% of his diet plus is berries and roots and grass and grubs, not salmon. see, we haven't been really noticing any salmon up here. And now I was doing expeditions right along that coastline during this. The bears are getting skinnier and skinnier because they got leukemia, because they're eating so many berries. And berries are really, really good at accumulating radiation. And so when they eat 200,000 to 300,000 berries a day. We don't, right? But they do. And so they're bioaccumulating it on a whole different level. It's kind of like what if a spider eats the insects and bioaccumulates it 1,000 times more than the current background radioactive fallout. And so they disappear first. And so normally when you're studying the insects, you're studying the spider webs to see what species are in that area. Now you can't find the spider webs. In British Columbia this summer, 5 million sockeye salmon expected to return and spawn, but only 600,000 came, and local grizzly bears are bearing the brunt of it. Well, the bears are emaciated. They're not emaciated because because they also eat caribou and deer and elk and all kinds of species. They're not, and then they can eat. There was this incredible diversity in the tidal zones in that area, by the way. I'll show you that coming up. Grizzly bears are bearing the brunt of it. There's a complete misrepresentation because the majority of their diet is nothing to do with salmon. And it was symmetrical throughout that coastline is why they were... but we've never seen that before, see? And we've seen salmon failures before. We're seeing mass species failures, and we'll get to tons of the recent ones coming up. Mysterious mass deaths of Alaska birds baffle scientists, 2016. No influenzas is ever mentioned. No tritium is ever mentioned. Tens of thousands of dead birds are washing up on the beaches of Alaska. And all the species known as the common murres, who dive 600 feet all day, every day for their entire life, appeared to have starved to death because there's no anchovies or squid or sardines or krill or herring or nothing in the tidal zone on top of that for them to have a backup. Biologists who examined the birds said they appeared emaciated. Their stomachs are empty, and we know they're starving. But see how the editors can fool the words around a little bit? 10 sperm whales die after stranding on the Yorkshire coast. Because this is something important too when we talk about these particular things here. The apologists for the nuclear industry will claim that the pilot whales are the only ones that does this, right? And the majority of the dead beachings and strandings have post-Fukushima. There's a few incidences, but that was during heavy nuclear testing in the ocean. Starvation caused the death of whales found at sea line. Starvation. 2022. 14 sperm whales found dead in mass stranding on Australia Island, right by the border of Tasmania last year. You guessed it, they were emaciated. 14. 29 sperm whales in the North Sea breached because of starvation. By the way, sperm whales don't feed in the North Sea. As much cesium in number 4 fuel pool as in all 800 atomic bombs ever dropped. Now, Arne Gunnarsson, I showed you earlier, claimed reactor 4 fuel pool was intact. 230 whales stranded at the same time as the sperm whales in the Tasmanian beach. Then there was another stranding, a second mass stranding, plus the sperm whales at the same time as the pilot whales. And it seemed like pilot whales won't stop killing themselves in Australia. It's kind of like the end of the migratory run for them. They don't find their food and they can't survive anymore. And up to 2016, they usually report them as emaciated. U.S. biologists probed the death of 70 emaciated gray whales. 70. So I'm introducing you to, and it's such a very important subject that I go through a lot of trouble to being inclusive of the material as, I can't show it all to you because we have too much of it. So 70 emaciated gray whales. No, they all died of ship strikes. Scientists are worried that 1,000 gray whales died so far this year, because if you find 70 and they're emaciated, that meant around 700 were emaciated that you didn't find. You're only going to find 10%, basically, you know what I mean? And so scientists worried that 1,000 have died so far. Well, so was I. At least 6 emaciated fin whales wash up dead on the French shores. I thought it was only pilot whales that done that, Dana. No, that's the propaganda, and they've only been doing it heavily since the nuclear age, and specifically since Fukushima. That's the gallows laugh, by the way. And I mean, that's emaciated. There's not almost. That's like, oh shit, we're in trouble. Manatees now officially under an unusual mortality event. Oh, I thought it was just the pilot whales. No, it's everything. As you'll see as we go through this, 30 whales found dead in an unusual mortality event in Alaska because they ran all that way, didn't find any food, and starved to death. And 1 gray whale. So 14 humpback, a fin whale, 11 fin whale, and 1 gray whale stranded on islands in Alaska's western Gulf and along it. That's just in one go. Spokesperson said the whales are in very poor nutritional condition, emaciated. Second dead dolphin found on this beach, and they try to blame it on you, the local scum that works for the industry. And so this is what they pulled out of the dolphin's throat and claimed the dolphin swallowed it because they were so hungry. And because you polluted the ocean, that's what's killing all the animals lately. But first off, that's around 2 feet long. There's zero possibility that the dolphin ate that and choked to death and washed up on the beach. Zero possibilities. That was some degenerate piece of shit brainwashed by the industry. Second stranded dolphin found in an area with a belly full of garbage in a month. These animals are actually not stupid. You stuffed garbage in it, and there's the proof right there. The dolphin, by the way, was emaciated. It was starving to death, so it started going around and eating stuff that don't have anything to do with food, did it? When you see wrinkles on the seals and the sea lions, then that's 100% an indication of emaciation, that they're starving to death. Because the blubber is what gives them that unique shape. Whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. Everybody like, well, I've never seen nothing like it since Fukushima. Scratch out the word Fukushima. 51 whales on Friday to mass stranding. Less than a week after, 145, 9 pygmy killer whales perished. In the latest stranding, 90 whales beached themselves to try to commit suicide. This is post-Fukushima. The majority of the pilot whales' deaths are since Fukushima. There was some strandings before that. The majority of that, almost entirely, was during the nuclear bomb testing. You're talking about strandings across the entire breadth of New Zealand in a very short period of time. So it's not like they had one sick member and they all followed themselves up on the beaches, right? That's not what's going on. They're starving to death. And it's symmetrical through the entire breadth of New Zealand in just a short period of time. More than 400 whales beached themselves in New Zealand. No, they 200 whales stranded in New Zealand refloat themselves and they beach again right away. And that's a dishonest headline right there. More than 600 pilot whales washed ashore in New Zealand and the South Island over the past 2 days. 600. And we covered all that as it was happening. Okay, we're going to I'm just going to go through a bunch of older headlines before we get to the next stage, and it won't take too long. But these are you probably haven't seen them if you haven't been around for a while. We've opened the door to hell at the Fukushima plant, and that's exactly the right context. Top scientist, which was David Suzuki from Canada, said Fukushima is the most terrifying situation one can imagine. Is the most I've seen a paper which said if reactor 4 goes during a quake and the fuel rods are exposed, is bye-bye Japan, and it should evacuate the coastline in North America. Well, that's reactor 4. You should evacuate the coastline in North America, the Atlantic included. If that goes. If the fuel pool touches and detonates, that happens. Well, guess what? That happened to 4 different reactors, not just one. New concerns about the radiation levels in the fish from the Pacific. The numbers are staggering. It's a major event worldwide. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Marine mammal stranding shatters the records on the West Coast, 10 times worse than they've ever seen before. 3 years of babies crashed and burned. Doesn't even make sense that they're fine and all of a sudden 3 years in a row they're not. 10 giant whales found dead in the Pacific off the U.S. coast 2015. Victims of mysterious afflictions. We heard that word a lot in those years. Mass die-off of walruses, seabirds, reported Uruguay. Experts say something out of the ordinary, and they never said tritium, and they never said avian influenza. They said perplexing. We're at a loss. Maybe they ran into toxin. Yeah, it's called Fukushima. 13 baby gray whales, 55 dolphins dead on the West Coast. Rash dead humpbacks in Oregon. Corpses of sea lions and birds and sea turtles decomposing, nothing feeding on them. Mysterious deaths probed by the non-government. Fear of whales encountering radiation hotspots, and volunteers were trained about the dangers of the radiation. They're all gone. Shock as the sardines vanish off California. Just asked the MERS and the TERS. The fishermen didn't find a single one all summer. Scientists, this is about the entire Pacific Ocean. Canada, Mexico, United States, NOAA. We don't know why the young aren't surviving. I was out there. And you'll see those pictures, some of those pictures coming up in a bit. The coastline's gone. It's gone. Wait till you see it if you haven't seen it before. Animals are delirious, disoriented up and down the West Coast, displaying unprecedented behaviors. And experts know something isn't right. Water offshore is so lacking in things like anchovies, sardines, squid. Interesting fact, the U.S. West Coast and new UN reports that 95% of Fukushima discharges is transported in the Pacific. I showed you the plumes at the beginning. And they know, because we got the models from all kinds of countries and the best of the best universities. Covers the planet typically 20 to 30 days. And it's not there, it's got out. If you're not going to talk about the truth, what's the point of being on planet Earth is the question. TV journalist, poison Fukushima plant is spreading around the world, causing incalculable damage. They may never get this under control. They never even tried. They purposely are still denying this happened today, 12 years later. We hounded them for the first couple of years. He finally admitted the reactors melted. It was like 3 years before Wikipedia claimed, yeah, that's right too. By the way, I forgot to mention the reactors melted down. Have a nice day. Southern California fishermen skunked, haven't seen a squid, no anchovies, no sardines, usually 10,000 pounds a day. Complete crashes at the oyster hatcheries. The sardines, the mackerels are missing. The pelicans' sites are alarmingly deserted. It was something like 20,000 breeding pair. They only had 2 or 3 chicks. before they moved on. Record number of sick sea lions, ultra rare whales, mammals, birds, fish in odd places. We're still seeing that today, man. It's really something, my goodness. Sardine population plummeted along the U.S. West Coast. A collapse of the species feared. The Canadian Pacific fishermen caught no sardines in 2013. Complete collapse of the sardine population on the west coast of Canada. Nobody knows what's going on. Notice how many times did you see tritium in this and avian influenza? Oh, that's right, you didn't. Marine birds are disappearing in the Pacific Northwest. Significant ecological shift, crashes. Not bird wrecks, but crashes. Something's happening on a big level, and what is it? Well, I showed you over and over and over. You can deny it all you want, but then you haven't got a real equation. You no longer have a brain. If you're going to use propaganda, how do you expect to have a future? By the way, the Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium-239. Former diplomat, Fukushima disaster go on almost to infinity, I'm afraid. It'll never be resolved if the situation at the plant continues. Mind-blowing die-off of seabirds on their way from California to Alaska. Mind-blowing, unprecedented, worst ever seen, baffling. Why are they dying? Every bird we're seeing is starving to death, withering away, catastrophic molting due to unknown causes. Unknown. Imagine the incredible arrogance to say they don't know. To even suggest they don't know is humiliating, to call themselves humans. Japanese U.S. ambassador's letter from the former Japan ambassador, worsening radioactive contamination at sea will soon awaken the whole world. But there's $1 billion public relation firm at work making sure you can never find this. You're so fortunate if you found this. You have no idea, really. The die-off of birds all over Alaska beaches, floating in the Pacific, they seem to be starving, deformed, abnormal. Government model shows airborne radioactive plumes covering the entire west coast, U.S., Canada, by March the 22nd. 10 times more radioactive than the plume coming from the Fukushima plant on the same day. And radiation levels in some plumes had no discernible decrease after crossing the Pacific. No, well, the whole planet. They're talking about up right there, right? March the 18th, March the 22nd. But by the 7th of April, we were in real trouble, and there was no way back. And then we wouldn't. They not only that, they sabotaged everybody's future by pretending it didn't happen. It's clear that the low-level contamination is more dangerous than a single dose. Grasshoppers with deformed wings, gray eyes, not reds, birds with abnormal sperm. Oh, it's not just birds. It's claiming that it's likely to hit the coastline. Well, it hit it in 27 days nonstop, and everything washed back down to your coastlines and wiped out your tidal zones in increments over the next couple of years until nothing can survive there. And if you go out at a big moon, you'll see a few things in a few places, but that's it. You won't see everything again because it's mostly wiped out. Fukushima farmer sees 16 of his 30 horses die suddenly in 2013. No disease, no parasitic worms, high cesium levels. His daughter tried to commit suicide, distraught. We're almost there. Scientists mystified by an unusual stranding of large sea creatures on the west coast. In 3 weeks, 5 dead whales at the beach. It's totally something new, 2015. Now they're like, no, they've been doing that for years, boy. It's always been like that. That was totally something new. Something strange. It's eerie. And the thing with that statement there, what's the odds of 2 dead whales in the same place? It's normal now, 2023. What? There's only one? What, are you kidding me? It didn't look very hard. Here, researchers sounding the alarms over striking changes in killer whales, unusual high mortality rates, odd behaviors. Experts fear something's wrong with the environment, again. And here's another hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Nothing like this has ever been attempted. A Yale professor, the esteemed, distinguished Yale snob professor. All of humanity will be threatened for thousands of years if the uniform fuel pool touches and have a nuclear reaction. Let me show you a picture of reactor 4. Oh, I might as well show you reactor 3 while we're at it. Here you go. So if the fuel pools, which are at the very top of this building that don't exist, and there's literally nothing left, then all of humanity will be threatened for thousands of years because it never goes away, pulsing energy every second, wrecking the ecosystem, sterilizing the birds and the insects and everything else. And you better have a talk, you better start having a conversation about it. You better get rid of nuclear. You got to shut down all the fuel pools worldwide. Millions of salmon mysteriously just disappeared. Literally within 2 days, it disappeared. It just crashed. I've never seen, ever seen it, nor can I explain it. Top Hong Kong, who now turned their back on it, the current administration has gone nuts pro-nuclear. Fukushima is a global threat. The situation could prove catastrophic for the world because that's what radiation does. And they know it is because they've been looking at it for 80 years straight. Mysterious for 80 years of lies. When are you going to wake up and say, no, stop doing that? Mysterious phenomenon off the U.S. West Coast. Fish disappeared. Whales nearly absent. No krill. High rates of egg failures among the birds. There's nothing there. Just a lot of clean, warm water. And that's what I was reporting in November 2014, by the way. Was you can see to the bottom everywhere. I never seen nothing like it. And I used to dive that whole coastline for years and years. Worrisome evidence at Fukushima plant. The latest releases appear to be carrying much more contaminated water than before into the Pacific. No precedence for what's happening. We're on untrodden ground. Latest releases. Like, first off, they refuse to acknowledge that's reactor 3 and that's reactor 4. Their version of it looks perfect. Here's their version of reactor 4. And I put this picture together because I got tons of different media doing the same thing. But this is ABC Australia, the biggest in Australia. BBC is the biggest in the United Kingdom. CBS is the biggest in the United States. And CNN is in everybody's home. Sailor's horrific Pacific journey goes viral, smashes records, picked up by The Guardian, the USA Today. Yeah, I said it can roll it to propaganda. We covered it when it was happening. Researchers say massive decline of fish is thrown off the ecosystem. Massive decline of fish is thrown off the ecosystem. Population has collapsed. They're gone virtually everywhere. The whales' numbers are dropping significantly. The squid are disappearing. Other major die-offs were seen. Millions of dead fish in the Pacific Northwest. The ocean conditions have gone to hell. Salmon fungus, covered in fungus, red lesions all over, gaping sores, extinction concerns. It could be the end. Expert is crazy, unprecedented, catastrophic. Now, these headlines are based upon 6 or 7 of mainstream media, and they were always linked right below, right? It was based upon 6 or 7 media's narratives, the consensus, I should say. San Diego, sardines, crayfish disappeared from the Pacific Ocean. They just vanished. Marine mammals are starving, struggling to survive on the West Coast. Strandings in the past 5 weeks exceeded what's normally seen for an entire year. Well, there was no normal year. Much larger than anything on record. And the starfish, they went for the West Coast from 84 species to 2 or 3, and neither one of them were healthy. The majority of them were just big tumors. And you can see those pictures up at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. So this was, it just happened overnight because the starfish use the ocean water like we use blood, right? And so they're very vulnerable. There's a name for it. They're a keystone species that, when it comes to pollution, unprecedented, largest animals on Earth found dead on the West Coast, emaciated. Oh, I'm sorry, very emaciated. Food supplies killed off. Most of the whales have been tracking for the last 2 years and not doing well. I think we're going to see more of this, 2015. NOAA, young herrings suddenly disappear from the Pacific. No one can find them. It's enigmatic. Something has happened. Millions of missing salmon raising alarms. Most different year ever. Fishermen only catching jellyfish. Japanese government, 2013, unprecedented situation of radioactive pollution from Fukushima. Intensive contamination areas designated near downtown Tokyo. And officials say health assistance for kids and pregnant women is needed. The lab rats, that's what we're all actually talking about. It actually gave 80,000 dosimeters to pregnant women and the school children in the nuclear wasteland itself. I'm sorry, the no-go zone that everybody else on the planet calls a nuclear wasteland. The Japs are just cruel, man. They're the cruelest when it comes to kids. It's like they hate their guts or something. Radiation readings spiking to record levels all around the Fukushima plant. No, Dan, it's just tritium. There's 2.2 grams, Dan. It's in 1,000 tanks. Stop your fairmonger, Dana. U.S. Energy Secretary, tragic Fukushima event has global consequences. Japan's Fukushima Daiichi plant is the world's worst nuclear disaster. You got 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. Each fuel pool had 5 reactor cores. No, Chernobyl's the worst, Dana. I saw it on Netflix. We only got 5 more of these or so. And let me show you some pictures from the expeditions. We're almost down to the lineup. No, that can't be that easy. Fukushima has humanity on the brink of a possible worldwide nuclear holocaust. And the world as we know it has changed, and the effects on our health are incomprehensible. For the first time, officials admit the shortage of homeless, and destitute, and victims of society, and immigrants who don't speak the language at the nuclear meltdowns. TEPCO promises to find more homeless. The BBC reveals homeless people cleaning reactors. Modern slavery. Study on International Atomic Energy Agency website. Core meltdown risk is 1,000% higher because of Fukushima. Nuclear engineering said a nuclear disaster is a certainty over the next 30 years in Europe. Europe's like, let's build more reactors. We're a new administration. It won't happen to us. We're, like the Japs said, we'll build it in a tsunami zone. There'll never be another tsunami. The tectonic plates will never shift again. Doomsday-like radiation. If fire in the pool of Unifor would be a global catastrophe, nuclear expert. Let me have a look here. Oh shit, I think we got ourselves a doomsday-like radiation plume from Fukushima. And there's so many reactors and fuel pools gone. Pretending this is not happening is the definition of stupid. It really is. It happened, and pretending that you can just cover this one up, this is the mother of all events for this planet. And the effects now have reverberated forever. And we need to fight so that we can have species in the near future. Get pictures of birds if you can, because that luxury is quickly drying up. So we have a lot of polls. Are they in that building? And the minute that you say to yourself, no, they're not at the top of that building to the left, Dana. The minute you say that is the minute you start having a future. Okay, so this reactor 3, the fuel pools are gone in there. Never forget that, because that was a mixed oxide. That was a nasty reactor, reused, reclaimed from nuclear missiles and fuel. So this was a very toxic. It's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, by the way. So Germany put out a model of the dispersions in the Pacific Ocean. Now this is based on 6 years.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
That's pretty terrifying, right? 6 years later. My problem with that story was that this one is 16 days. Which one is more scarier? So when this one stops, you're talking about 16 days. It pulses energy every second, and it hates bacteria and fungus, so good luck to your forest ever sucking up water again. You got 1 million becquerels per square meter of the xenon-133. You had 20 million particles of the iodine-131 per liter in another study. You had 220 million atoms from a Canadian, this was another Canadian study, of the iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. And they said, well, it's a very, very small emitter. It doesn't emit very far. No, it saturates the thyroid glands of the birds and the insects and all the little critters in the ecosystem that the entire species of humanity are dependent upon. And so they're producing insidious amounts of radioactive hormones. And of course, your children's thyroid glands are saturated. So the nuclear industry is so sadistic. For the first, and even right now, if you go to Google or something like that and type in, search for pictures of Fukushima ocean, and you'll see that show up everywhere. And that's just a tsunami. That was the nuclear industry, pumped that everywhere. And when you got enough people believing in it, they come out and debunk you with fact checker videos from the scumbag sites like Stinkfoot and that. But this was Noah's actual real model. It doesn't matter because this is the model that matters, and the majority of models worldwide were in line with that. That was the consensus. Well, you can imagine that the right thing to do was launch research expeditions. It was the easiest, quickest, smartest thing to do. Nobody was doing it, so frig it. I'm stupid. I went ahead and done it. And this is from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And we've done this for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year without coming home. And to call it an ordeal, it's hard to explain how mad, how incredibly mad that was. And that was that picture's during major forest fires where the sky was always, you come out every morning and the deck of the boat was covered in fallout from the plume of smoke that was grabbing radiation and dropping it down on you too. Okay, so that was the operation. We went out on the ocean year after year after year. And we attacked this from every direction. You have no idea, if you're not familiar, how many ways I have came after this. This is typical 4 to 5 months of a year is what you're looking at there. And same here. This was a typical day. Okay. Now the problem was, we know the species. Now I dove this whole coastline for years too. Let me move it ahead a bit. So that's a typical day, it looks like. I was heading back. I got caught in a hurricane that night. And we're trying to find the species to the left. Because the radioactive fallout And there's many, 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 and the fact that they lied about the buildings. When we went out and tried to find the species, these beautiful, amazing, just amazing, the normal species. This is normal for British Columbia, all the way to Alaska, all the way to California. That was normal. That was normal to your left. Now to the right, the after pictures, the same for the rest of them, are the post-Fukushima to the right. That I went up year after year. The species to your left, they didn't come back because radioactive fallout, a lot of it washes down to your tidal zones. They're the most vulnerable. They're exposed twice a day. So while I was out there doing that, the mainstream media...
My understanding is on
this.
top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
They should throw you off a reactor, you skink. So the species to your left are exterminated. They're actually exterminated due to radioactive fallout from Japan. They're going to go the way of the dodo bird anyway because all the nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation into your environment. You had major accidents, major dumping for decades unmitigated. And it's time to gut up. Now, I've done this whole coastline year after year, and the species came back, and my site is loaded with all these pictures with GPSs of the spots. The species never came back. And we documented it, and we're doing the same thing on the East Coast. Well, we're trying to. We're having a few issues. And just got 5 of these. We must be getting close here. Oh, we are. We're almost... We're getting close. Here we go. International Atomic Energy Agency admitted there's no such thing. My apologies. As a safe level. I'll turn that down for a second. Wow, and that came. That's a bit better. You get through 5 of these. Children with 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. So how many does a squirrel need, or or a beaver, or an otter, or a raccoon, or a skunk, Dana? It needs about 1. By the way, nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Because the body's only way to deal with it is to build a sarcophagus around it in increments over decades. And we call them tumors, right? 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Now, last night's show is the precursor to this show. And so if you've never seen last night's show, but you've seen this show, you should consider somewhere in the near future watching the other one. Inhaling just one radioactive hot particle can cause a cancer. Well, there's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. And humans are not the only one with those afflictions. It's all species, symmetrically throughout the millions of species. And so they dreamed up this number of 100 becquerels a kilogram, which was the cover story. In America, raised theirs to 1,100. In Europe, raised theirs to 1,200 becquerels a kilogram. And Japan said, look, see, we're not near as bad as Europe or America. But see, the study shows that a fraction of the numbers we're talking about over a short time will devastate children's heart. Irreversible heart damage for children. So we're having a hard time doing research expeditions this year. I'll just introduce you to a few more of them. Just showed you some earlier from the ocean side. We also do insects. And so I'm lugging around the trailers. And there, what you see is I got the trailer wheel ran over the ramp. Now I got locks for it, but it doesn't matter because my truck is still in the garage, like in the garage. And tomorrow they're going to jack the transfer case. They ruled out the transmission, because he thought it was the transmission, and the mechanic was supposed to work on my truck today. Broke his finger yesterday, and so he was the GM guy, right? And so the other guy's really good. He didn't show up till 10 a.m. I showed up at 8, and only got 2.5 hours sleep last night. So the truck's been in there all day. They've been at it all day with the laptop and everything else, trying to pinpoint what the hell it is. But they're really good, and they're not gonna gouge me too much. But the two front, before I forget, because I could easily forget this one. I got lucky one way, but the two front wheel bearings, right? We changed the wheel bearing on the passenger side last year. That was like $260 plus. I think it was $260. I got two of them today for $110, but they wanted $50 to ship it or something. $60, whatever it was. $188. I got two of the wheel bearings will be here early next week. Otherwise, you got to wait till the end of September. So they jack you for the extra $50. I'm not complaining because that's less than the price of one I bought last year. So I paid for it, ordered that today. They ruled out the transmission, which I knew it wasn't transmission. And I'll probably cover this at the end of it, but knowing me, I'll forget. And so, because I'm lugging around the trailers and lugging around equipment and lugging around the boats, and all these years, all these hills and all these potholes, we've done a wee bit of damage, turns out, to the drivetrain of that monster. That's the way it goes. And we're losing research opportunities, right? And I'm sick to my guts because we're struggling. But I'm really happy because we're going to have, hopefully, the moral diagnosis of what's going on. And he said I might need a transfer case, but I might not. I might just need some parts in it because you can rebuild a transfer. They can get expensive, trust me. But we're in a hole. Today probably cost me $600, I think. I haven't got the bill yet, but that's counting the two front wheel bearings. So tomorrow, hopefully, they don't go too high on me. We're just trying to get a diagnosis and figure it out from there. So we got the two front parts coming. We'll get them installed. The problem was we didn't do a wheel alignment the last time. And now we got both sides, right? Because you're lugging around a lot of equipment. And you're lugging it through harsh conditions. And you're out, we've traveled. Last year in April, we were out camping out in snowstorms and ice storms. This was we're looking at the dead die-offs in April, remember that? I got caught in an ice storm the first night in a tent. The next night I got caught in a snowstorm in a tent, -30. And the next night trying to get the data, and the next night was a windstorm. Just shit kicked out of me for 4 days straight. But the problem is, we've been doing this for years and years and years, and everything I got has been... I keep up as much maintenance as I can, but it's hard to keep up lately. I apologize for not being able to do it. Explosions of sea lion. So now we're almost through the preamble. Just a few more of these headlines. This is this year, 2023 stuff. So they said of explosion of sea lion deaths in Peru amid deadly bird flu outbreak. Deadly bird flu outbreak. This is how brainwashing works, by the way. And when they show you pictures, they're showing you the most emaciated sea lions I ever seen. And brother, I've seen my share of this stuff. That's not bird flu. Bird flu doesn't do that. That's done because you can't find any food for 1,000 miles or something. Lost all their blubber and all their muscle. And check on a sea lion amid rising cases of bird flu. There's not a single human on the planet is going to look at that and call it bird flu in the industry. It was 3,500 sea lions found dead. And that's one of the pictures. And here's the other picture. I'd like to know how they knew that was a sea lion, first off, because when I looked at it, I was like, I don't know what it is. What the frig is it? It's emaciated like I've never seen before. Imagine sending that to the expert and say, what the frig is it? I think it's a sea lion, but I'm not sure. I better send it to the experts. There's only about 1/10 of the sea lion left. And how many was there? 3,400 or something? 3,400. And they blamed it on the bird flu, the dirty, disgusting bastards. It's normal in the industry anyway. And so they detected the bird flu, which the sea lions obviously didn't die of, but they claimed did. That they were blaming that for the ducks, the seagulls, the geese, the hawks, the owls, the bears, the foxes. We covered it all, by the way. The bobcats, the raccoons, the dolphins. Even trees were down there saying, like, that's the bird flu for sure. See that tree? That looks just like the bird flu. Starvation causes, they're blaming it on everything. If you had a car accident driving down the road, you got to the hospital, he died of the bird flu. Look at him. Where's the other half of the head? The bird flu ate it, Dana. Starvation causes mass bird deaths. Great shearwaters are the primary casualty. Now, they were in the middle of the so-called avian influenza last summer. Mass die-off of the gannets and shearwaters and the kittiwakes and the fulmars and everything else. The terns and cormorants, which left the west coast of Canada and moved to the east coast where they'd never been before. And part of our study group right now in field studies is the cormorants. And because they can dive, they're not scavengers, they can actually dive. They had quite a few babies. They had a successful summer. And the seagulls had a 4% survival rate here. And the large numbers of dead birds found on the island shores in June were confirmed to have died from starvation. No highly pathogenic avian influenza was found, and they were right in the middle of this disaster of avian influenzas. Now, I was pumping out these types of videos. I'm assuming they watched and said, well, we'll test it ourselves, rather than send it to the same government lab like everybody else. Lo and behold, the dead birds they examined as emaciated. So how can you have dead birds all along 500 miles that way and 500 miles that way in every community, but there's one community who sends theirs to their own independent experts, didn't find the bird flu, but found they had starved to death. Because they won't be as obvious as the sea lions. But to show you these sea lions, and then that headline, that takes balls, man. That takes hatreds. By CNN, by the way. Reassuring, isn't it? And I think this is the last one before we start into the recent stuff. Climate change likely playing a role in 40% drop in the Pacific gray whale population. 40% drop, climate change. Now, I showed you earlier, right, 70 emaciated gray whales, which meant 700 died that you didn't see. Scientists are investigating the causes of nearly 40% decline in the Pacific, and one primary suspect is there's no food. They starved to death. In 2016, birth rates are also down by 40%. So they went from 27,000 in 2016 to 16,650. Say 10,000 dead since 2016. Primary cause of the death is lack of food. They starved to death, emaciated. Well, we broke the food chain. We killed the food chain. It's not that the fish migrated somewhere else like they claim to. It doesn't work that way. It's engineered into them where they're going to be. Their predisposition is already coded into the genetic makeup, right? They're genetically superiorly selected to be that particular migratory stock. That's their destiny. They have no say in it. The shocking number of dead dolphins and porpoises washed up on the Cornwall beaches. The shocking number. 30 animals. That's in 2019, by the way. It was around 5,000 found in those 2 years or something, which worked out to around 50,000 dead. You're only going to find roughly 10%, is that consensus? A record, unprecedented, never heard of before, 30 dead dolphins and porpoises in just January alone. There was a record of a total of 170 similar deaths last year, 250 in 2017. It was unprecedented, never heard of. I'd be lucky to find one or two in a year. Finding 250 is just, I meant 2,500 died, right? It's unusual for a sperm whale in particular to become trapped in the way because the species tends to favor deeper water. There's a bunch of sperm whales, which was deer. I can't remember. I thought I had it. They were saying they were trapped, but they don't belong there. They're not trapped. They're gone somewhere else looking for food in desperation. Animals will get smaller over the next centuries. They downsize to survive. That's brainwashing on a whole different level because the animals like the squid and the visible capelins and codfish and the average person is going to come in contact with are always coming in underweight, always coming in what they describe themselves as skinny. You got to get a lot of them to get a few fillets. You'll hear people say stuff like that. Animals will get smaller over the next century. Genetics doesn't work that way. Usually the effects of mutations are to reduce the growth rate to make things smaller. That's why we got such small alligators and elephants, I suppose. 24th of May, that's why the whales are so small. Animals will get smaller. They grow less efficiently. There's less capability of catching food, and they tend not to live as long. In other words, they have a short lifespan because their food supply is next to nothing. And that's going to disappear over the next few years, so they need to explain it away, right? Highest mortality year for dolphins and whales. 586 dolphins and whales, mostly dead, found washed ashore. And that's my last site they took down when I was out looking for spiders. I had 23,700 subscribers on my other YouTube channel. They took it down, no strikes on my account 2 years ago this summer. It was a little over 2 years now, because they done it when I was out looking for spiders 400 miles away from my home in the woods. And so they got rid of all of these people that have been around for over a decade. And then they isolated me. And now I'm lucky to get, how many people do I have on my show tonight? Wow, I got 30 people. Hello, everybody. Shit, I'm nervous as crap. I'm not used to anybody being on my show anymore. Wait, what? We got 37 votes on a poll? Score. Yeah, baby. Yeah, they took down this site. We'll move on. Because I grabbed things in bunches I didn't even realize. That's that last one here. Anyway, I worked to remove the dead whales at Inkip Point. That was June of this year. The strandings are expected to increase. Now we're into the current cycle of news. And that's how the story goes, though. In order to tell this story, you just can't come out and tell this story. You got to do this whole preamble so anybody new has real context to work with. That wasn't too bad. Last night preamble was like 1 hour and 40 minutes or something, wasn't it? which is the preamble to this show. So this show is going to probably work out to be 6 hours long total. Last night and tonight is a whole package. You got a real package of documentation. It's like absurd. It's absurd. You're probably looking at around 2,000 pieces of information in 2 days. Outstanding. Let's keep moving here because we got crap. Just a lot to get through. It goes pretty quick though when it comes to the species because you're just covering hot points instead of fighting about reactors and everything. The strandings are expected to increase. What an interesting statement. That whale is emaciated, period. That's emaciated. You can see the peanut head actually on that one. A ranger says strandings will become more common as the whale population increases. And we heard that quite a bit from rangers. Because they're just regurgitating the ranger book or something. The species are crashing everywhere. I showed you that earlier, and I showed you a lot of it. 3 hours north of Brisbane. Oh, the Australians figures. A sick bunch of, and the government over there. The pro-nuclear in Australia, I really got a problem with these people. A marine biologist said weather conditions can lead to sick whales beaching themselves. They're born into that. That's their environment. That's just a daily thing for a whale. To suggest that storm conditions is why, it's pretty dishonest. Or extremely gullible. And I don't think it's that. I think it's just being dishonest. The stranding is the second in a week after a similar incident just south of there. There's a young one, eh? Keep your distance. Britain and Australia are notorious for doing that. The dead animals belong to the monarchy, right? How dead whales became the symbol of a political battle in New Jersey and elsewhere. This is about the windmills, right, offshore. And I got no concept of why we're not doing geothermal. Which is perfect. You don't need no storage. Just walk away for 100 years and produce energy. It's stupid simple. Ziff held a press conference in Atlantic City calling for President Biden to step in and do an immediate federal investigation to halt offshore wind farm activities. There's tons of wind farms worldwide and never had any adverse side effects with the wildlife. But the pro-nuclear in America is very strong. They got the most reactors worldwide, right? And they're vehement about trying to promote the unicorn, the small modular reactors that don't even exist. They don't even have an actual license into the regulatory agencies. Authorities documented the death of 11 whales, but I just showed you all the way up to now. It was worse than that before they start doing the wind turbines. There's actually more whales since they're doing the wind turbines. That's a joke. Not a very good one either, but it's a joke. 11 whales off New Jersey. At least 12 dolphins died along the New Jersey shore, which is not really a very big coastline. And then they go, excessive ocean noises can hurt the whales. It's all propaganda, unfortunately. Yeah, it hurts. It definitely hurts the marine life. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what they're doing is propaganda, though. I mean, when you look at World War II and World War I, the ocean traffic during that period and after that period exploded. And we didn't see anything similar. And it cut back altogether now. Sports fishing is almost dead out there. The fishing industry is almost dead. It's only international traffic. And they don't travel the intricate coastlines. They're zip to zip, A to B, right? I've been working with NOAA to address the vessel strikes and entanglements. There was recorded since 1978 was 1,200 vessel strikes. There's over 10,000 dead gray whales alone. At the beginning, I showed you the mortality events for all kinds of species. And not, there's probably a mortality event for beak whales, for goodness sakes. Certainly fin whales and killer whales and other whales. And I showed you 4 different ones. Humpbacks, gray whales. So this is the nuclear industry's fingers in the pie. And that whale's pretty emaciated, by the way. And so were most of the whales. We covered it this whole time, right? We actually have one of the most diverse ecosystems for marine mammals because the tidal zones are naked. You killed all that just after Fukushima. Whereas that the diverse ecosystem is in serious danger, and recent whale deaths are the first of many more to come. Well, I showed you all the way back to, say, 2013 earlier, a constant flood of that stuff, didn't I? Nobody said anything about windmills. There was nothing about tritium. There was no ship strikes mentioned whatsoever in all those years. That's just since the last few years you're hearing that narrative. Researchers are studying unusually high numbers of deaths among 3 whale species: the mink, the North Atlantic right whale, the humpback. Oh, don't forget the gray whale, which lost a massive amount of its population in the last few years. The majority that we found, and the vast majority at that, are emaciated. Majority of the whales in New Jersey, 9 of the 11 whales reported are humpbacks. There's an unusual mortality event for humpbacks since 2016, I showed you earlier. The whales are busy gorging themselves. No, they're busy starving to death. They're busy looking for food. They're not gorging themselves. It's completely dishonest what they're saying there. But it's meant to promote nuclear. And you shouldn't be doing the wind, per se, without storage. Why would you, really, right? If you can afford to do that scale, you can afford to do storage. It's idiotic, and the industry has suppressed it this whole time. But in reality, you should be using geothermal. Each community should have just its own geothermal well. The technology is so obsolete, it's ridiculous. Researchers are studying unusual high deaths among the 3 whale species. Dead whale calf recently, these are recent stories we're talking through now for the rest of the show. A dead dwarf minke whale calf. You can see spine sticking up, see that? Right, there's no baby fat from the milk or something, right? The whale, that baby is emaciated. And even the head, look at the peanut head itself. That's like wicked. But look at the spine sticking up. A dead minke whale. That young calf died of natural causes. It was emaciated. It was emaciated. Yeah, and the evidence is worse than emaciated. It's hideously emaciated. Whale carcasses on the Martha vineyards fuel speculations about wind turbines. Again, this is the nuclear industry desperation for attention. This is the nuclear industry calling wolf constantly. Like, how can you have a future and a nuclear industry at the same time anyway? That there is no known connection between offshore wind activity, whales' death, but some remain skeptical. No, the nuclear industry is funding the skepticism. And then they're quoting, of all people, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. Why would you quote a degenerate military-industrial complex like that, for goodness sakes? How are you supposed to get any credibility using scumbags like that? Mysterious orcas with bulbous head washes up dead and unexplained mass stranding. Orcas. Oh, this is a story about Chile. Showed it to be a healthy adult with no known signs that killed it, like cuts or anything like that. In 2019, there was a bunch of orcas washed up. I don't remember covering the story, so we grabbed it. Strange rare group of orcas stranded on the beach. The first event of its kind in 67 years and only the second ever recorded. in 67 years of keeping records, is what they're talking about. And only the second ever recorded. Well, the other one was during peak nuclear testing, I bet you. Some scientists suggest it might actually be a completely separate species. We got no worries. You might as well find them where you can, because nuclear industry hasn't given much of a lifeline. The animals weren't identified as a distinct group of orcas until 2000s, when he spotted whales that matched the odd facial markings and body shapes of orcas in 1955, New Zealand, and photographed them all over the Southern Ocean. Major nuclear testing during that period, holy shit. And 25 kiloton, 60 kiloton, 15 kilotons. That was right during that whole period, right? Because when you look at the history, some countries done a remarkable job, and you can see the correlation with nuclear testing when it does show up. Sperm whale found dead on North Maluku coast. Sperm whale. The last couple of years, last 3 or 4 years, I guess, we're seeing a lot of sperm whales in weird places they've never been seen before. And last year we had a few months of where they were finding whales way up rivers, freshwater rivers, in different parts of the world. It was all within like a 2 or 3 week period. And Canada had one that went all the way up in the Montreal Harbour, fresh water for the last 200 miles or something. Nobody's ever heard tell of a whale, and it was emaciated and died, by the way. It became stranded and died, no visible wounds on his beach. Inside tragic SeaWorld deaths, his trainer's limbs were torn off by a psychotic killer whale. It was just a fish, man. Pilot whale found dead off beak. All they may have died from infectious disease. Infectious disease. So there's a lot of headlines tonight that I didn't fit in the description because there was no room. It's ridiculous amount. This is Hawaii. May have died from an infectious disease. A disease can't affect them unless their immune system is compromised. Like they're emaciated, and then the disease is found, right? That's what we've seen, this pattern for at least the last decade anyway. Fishermen attacked was post-Fukushima. I say that with just a gallows laugh, obviously. Fishermen attacked by shark pulled overboard in the Everglades. Some stories I just found interesting, that's all. But I think it was just an accident. It was coming after a fish he had, and he reached down and bit his hand, let go. But they did want to blow it out of proportion. Well, no, I thought, and you never know, you had to check it out, right? Jesus, sharks jumping out of the water to get a human head, because they're seeing them from underwater. I used to work underwater. You'll see the head sticking over the boat. And where you breach like a shark, you start recognizing it as prey, right? Exceptionally rare, 30-foot-long whale washes up dead on the Spanish beaches. And it's emaciated, period. Severely. Experts concerned over rising gray whale strandings. Not Ranger Ricky, of course, but the normal humans. There's the fifth dead gray whale stranding, dead whale, aka, along Washington coast that month alone. And wildlife officials investigating unusual rise in the number of gray whale strandings since 2019. And I've heard that forever, but you never hear any results, right? Oh, they're investigating it. Shut up, you liar. 1987, Orca had a fashion of wearing a dead salmon as a hat, which was an interesting. They went through the young orcas would sometimes do these trends, and for a while, for one summer only, they were going around using a salmon on their head. That's just a depiction they put there. So they start making memes or something about it. But the unlikely subject of memes at the moment, after a number of attacks on boats in Europe, experts believe they were teaching calves how to target the rudder and stop the vessels. It was just something they picked up. It's not some orca uprising or something, unfortunately. Around 30 killer whales were spotted in Monterey Bay over the weekend with no clear explanation why so many had gathered. And look at the poll they had there. I am a male, female, non-binary, or an orca. Orcas themselves not immune to memes and cultural trends. As many other things, the dead salmon was trending in 1987. The K-pod began carrying the dead salmon around on her nose. Over the next 5 or 6 weeks, the behavior spread. By the end of it, orcas from her own and 2 other pods were wearing dead salmon hats. And all of a sudden, the fad was over. Or a few times the following summer, excuse me. But they gathered up in a group in Monterey Bay. Nobody knows why. They've never seen that kind of behavior, apparently. And there have been other incidences of weird stuff. Just touch on that. So they used to go in and wrap themselves up in crab and prawn traps, like it was a game, and then unwrap themselves. 5 more gray whales found dead along the Washington coast. Wildlife officials scratching their buddies behind have been investigating an unusual rise in the number of gray whale strandings since 2019. It's actually 2016, wasn't it? There was a growing hope the unusual mortality event was nearing its end. This month's increase in mortalities could play a role in determining it. No. We've been following it. It's 100% acceleration. Washington would see 4 to 6 whale strandings in a normal year. Well, not pre-Fukushima, you didn't. Right, and their scale starts at 2015. If you're going to have a normal year, you got to go back a few decades pre-Fukushima, haven't you? Because this doesn't exist pre-Fukushima. Look at the numbers, holy shit. 2019 was a peak year, they're saying, for findings. But 2015 is clearly an abnormality. Post-Fukushima is clearly, we're seeing this constantly in all species. And the population dropped by nearly 40% over the last 7 years, from 27,000 to 16,650. There's only 1,200 whales killed by boats reported since 1978. But if you listen to the industry, they'll try to say, oh no, that's boat collision. Or you know, it could be the windmills. 27,000 whales is 10,350 whales in the last 7 years. It's just gray whales are missing, which is 1,478 a year for 7 years. It's like the French Polynesian Islands. The nuclear testing the French was doing there, they say it was harmless, by the way, is equal to a nuclear Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I should say, because it's a plutonium bomb, is equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years. Is that a nuclear war or is that a nuclear war? When do we call it a nuclear war? We call Hiroshima and Nagasaki 2 bombs of nuclear war, but we don't call 12 years of a nuclear Nagasaki bomb every week for the French Polynesians. Are we really that gullible? Preliminary information showed a large number of the whales were emaciated. Gee, I never would have guessed that. What a shock. The finding isn't consistent across all whales, but it actually is, because we've been covering it the whole time. And if you go back and watch the beginning of the show, the first hour, you'll come back to this. You're like, okay, Dana, you got a good point. Gray whale diet, by the way, they live near the bottom of the ocean. And technically, the whales are eating plants on the ocean floor when scooping up their food too. So they can handle different diets. Krill, crab, larvae, ghost shrimps, plankton, really. The phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. And they're starving because we broke the food chain, the most important part of the food chain. And who's the most visible is the gray whales and other filter feeders like bivalves and clams and oysters and scallops and sea urchins and starfish and everything that lives in the tidal zone is typically a filter feeder. They used to live for 80 years. And kiss that one goodbye. And that's their favorite diet, see? As well as herring eggs, which is considered phytoplankton until they get a certain size. For most eggs are considered phytoplankton until they get to a certain size. Various kinds of larvae. And he said the main threat to the gray whales are shipping. But as they already acknowledged, the majority of them are emaciated. They can't help but stab you in the face as soon as they see you. It's built into their DNA. They hate your guts. Concern over a rising number of whales and dolphins off Wexford coast as the sea temperature increases. Amid threat to tourism as dead mammals numbers rise. Come out and see the dead whales, half price. Pay for the gas, we'll take you out. Alarming concern over rising sea temperatures amid threat to tourism as dead mammal numbers rise. See them grouping up. This is something we're not used to. And there's quite a lot of that coming up a bit. Look at all the birds feeding on them. It's amazing. What the hell is that? That's amazing. Small-toothed tiger shark. A new phenomenon can lead to a significant death toll for beloved creatures, especially dolphins on the beaches, due to lack of resources in returning them to deeper water when they come up. Several whales and a pod of 20 long fin whales were spotted off the southwest Wexford coast the week, with some becoming stranded and dying, looking for a place to commit suicide. We're concerned that we have unusual large numbers in the area in such a short space of time. We don't really know the reason they're all coming, that there's some coincidences we're exploring. Yeah, let's forget Fukushima happened. Pretend that never happened. And that's what everybody else is doing. Eventually you'll believe it yourself, and then you'll wake up one morning and you're like, I'm an idiot. I just destroyed my own future and everybody else's and my children and my friends and my families for a stupid fucking paycheck. And he says sheeple like pro-nuclear, doesn't it? We're concerned that we have an unusually large number in the area in such a short space of time. They don't even belong there on top of it. Oh, he said this, he said that, whatever, who cares? Good for him. Gonna blame it on everything. He's got a million excuses. Instead of any, it's all conjectures, all opinions, no facts. And there was a scumbag with the Irish whale and dolphin group. I'm not going to bore you with their narrative. Oh, look, another emaciated whale. 75-foot emaciated whale. Look how emaciated that figure is. My goodness. Tanks nuclear. For the first time ever, a narwhal is stranded on a Belgium shore. First time ever. Their tusks are not protected by enamel. They contain a system of channels and tubes, ushers and traces of water. And once inside, excites nerves at the center of the tooth. It's thought that this interaction alerts the animal's brain to chemical temperature changes in the environment. A trick when searching for food or a mate in the vast Arctic Sea. It's like a hound dog's nose, basically, is what they're trying to say. Isn't that something? Look at that. Where's all the polar bears? They've come there and wiped them out. But think about the coordination it takes for them to huddle like that. Stunning, isn't it? If you think that's stunning, give me a thumbs up. Ma Dana's begging for thumbs up again. Beluga whales and narwhals go through menopause. The beluga, they just had the migratory run, and I think it looked like it was a pretty successful run this year for the belugas again. They've been showing up in some weird places just this last 2 or 3 years. But they're one of the few herds, I think, that are still in reasonably good shape. They're just fascinating because they can turn their heads and look at you with their body, like a human, right? And they're very playful in captivity. They like playing with the kids on the other side of the glass. They play peekaboo and all kinds of weird stuff with them. Some of the pictures, the videos are just... it's an uncanny valley, right? And menopause is pretty unusual in the animal kingdom. Up until now, only humans and orcas, or killer whales, and short-finned pilot whales, wow, were known to stop reproducing decades before the end of their lives. Well, ain't that something? The short-finned pilot whales. What a coincidence. 2 new species now join the exclusive menopause club, the beluga whale and the narwhal. They got this really long post-productive life, which is a really strange biological phenomenon. Not when you're at the top of that order, see? But think about the coordination it takes for them to hover there like that, in unison like that. I'm just mesmerized with this picture when I seen it. I left it on my screen for hours, and for days after, I would pop it up and just leave it there. We get them down here. We get them down here too. The good belugas. And they really are a special whale. Based on the information, researchers found the beluga narwhal females stopped reproducing in their late 30s, early 40s, even though they lived to be 60, 70, and 80 years of age. I don't know why they put that picture there for. What did you? Oh, no, that was just one. Rasa humpback whale deaths. I got a bad habit of doing that sometime and not fixing up before I go live. Or I'll see a picture and I'll take it with the intentions of putting that first and then this second. Today I've done it backwards. And I seen it and I should have known better. Scientists advocates are investigating recent fatal strandings of humpback whales like Jerry, New York and North Jersey Beach. 6 in 2022, followed by a dozen in the first half of 2023. See, people throw money at them. They just fucking throw it at them. I'm out here doing incredible research in the most amazing place, right on the edge of the continental shelf for the northern hemisphere, 12 miles away from it. And we're supposed to have 46 million migratory birds a year. We got 16 expeditions punched in, but there's so many fucking breakdowns, excuse the language, so many breakdowns, engine problems, outboard. If the boat's breaking down, the truck's working. The truck's not working, the boat's breaking down, and you can't have one without the other to do the research. And I'm heartbroken. It might come to an end, though. We might get an answer tomorrow. I'm just going to deal with it. Whatever it is, it's going to be, right? I ordered in 2 front wheel bearings because that's got to get done. There's no excuses. We can't have an operation if we don't keep repairing it, and I don't know how we're going to do it. That's the way it's been going for the last few years. It's just fuck it, just keep going and deal with it. If you never took down my other site, humanity would have had a better chance because you have more people speaking about it in the conversation. They took down my site and they crippled this. And they got rid of over a decade of research. They disappeared it. They burned a decade of these presentations. Around 1,700 of these presentations are gone. Of all the expeditions, all that information, documentation, compilations, gone. Just disappeared. Stroke of a pen. Well, I was there looking for spiders that are missing. I know, bastard, they're looking for spider. You deserve it, Dana. You weirdo, you're looking for spiders. Horror film, the urgent warnings as 2,000 dead birds wash up on the Scotch beach in less than a week. Yeah, you know what they're going to say, don't you? The deadly avian influenza is getting everything. Chickens, it's getting trees, it's getting the rocks on the beaches. Look at them. They all got influenza. It doesn't jump species. It's been around for millions of generations. And after Fukushima, it suddenly decides to jump species, doesn't it? And it jumps everything. Raccoons, baby foxes. If they found a roadkill anywhere in Canada, United States interior, they checked it for avian influenza. At the same spot where they always got a yes. Common terns, kittiwakes, herring, gulls, black-headed gulls began washing up on the beaches. See, and it doesn't just, if it's going to jump the species, it's going to jump it in a bigger way what they're claiming. And we beat the shit out of them last year when they started talking about foxes and raccoons, baby this and baby that. We shit on them every 2 weeks with documentation. And then they gave it up that fall, right? They stopped saying shit like that. The numbers of deaths have been more than tripled, with 1,000 dead on Wednesday and a further 800 birds today. And again, right, like I showed you earlier about the sea lions. Oh, the bird flu got them, and they were all emaciated from months of starving to death. And the same thing with the birds. They had starved to death. They didn't have influenza when they done independent checking. And when I was doing the research last year in the snowstorms, windstorms, and freezing rainstorms, they were emaciated, and everybody knew it. For 600 miles of our coastline. Thank goodness we went and done it. At great cost. I mean, you know, it's hard to comprehend that we made it this far and got this much documentation, and the world still hates my guts. Hates my guts. I get 26 people on my stream. Bless your hearts, by the way. 26 for the amount of work that I actually do. Yeah, it's hard to comprehend how much work I could actually do if I was given an opportunity. I just had 7 stints put in. It's a pretty good time to start putting some good faith into me. I'm probably good for another 60 years, right? Cases of deadly outbreak of avian flu. Every time I hear that, I want to slap somebody. What could thousands of mysterious whales tell us about our weather? I just hate these people, man. And then they got the UN. See UN in the blue? Climate change. UN has taken over your videos on YouTube. You talk about COVID, you'll get UN right there before your stuff. If you're talking about bird flu, you'll get UN, and you're not allowed to look nowhere else. You're not allowed to talk about nothing else. You're only allowed to regurgitate whatever the degenerate military-industrial complex UN says. And so anyway, let's go through this bit. This is all just click stuff. I'll come in for the fun of it. Use my nice shiny head as a distraction. So they were wondering why whales are showing up everywhere in these weird spots. Mystery whales. That's not a whale. That's a big old ass tuna right there. There's a whole bunch of them. $1 million fish. The whales didn't belong here. And they'll always bring in a whole bunch of these lapdogs from the universities or key government agencies that were kicked out of the universities. Has not been observed before. You think, well, something has changed. Why are they all showing up where they don't belong? Oh, my apologies. Here we keep this going. I'll fix this. For the last 150 years, we have the records of these areas, Greenland, from locals. Never seen fin whales. Never seen fin whales. They see them regularly. And so they just make shit up. I'm screwing this up. Let me keep glancing. So then they start talking about the weather pattern and saying this is one of the catalysts for them showing up. And they talk about the feeder fish like the capelin, the smelt, the prawns, the shrimp, the mackerel, the pollock are showing up, and that's what the whales are allegedly chasing. And the dolphins, that's the white-nosed dolphin, I think. Yeah. We had 3 strandings here, the first time in history, on the east coast of Canada. And what do I got, like 100 views on the video or something? Our estimate is about 6,000 fin whales. Well, the 46 million birds that are supposed to be here right now, and the migratory seabirds, they didn't show up. So where did they go? Because they didn't show up last year either, right? Or the year before. But the fish later are here. We've been out 16 research expeditions, 6-7 hours at a time. And I got a lot of experience. Looking for it. And I can't find it. It ain't there, period. Not maybe, not perhaps. It's not there. And where they never used to be seen before. Well, when you actually look at them, you can tell they're emaciated. Let me go back a picture. If I find anything good, I'll zoom in, but there's different, some pilot whales and killer whales. Well, normally that's a migratory, they're chasing a migratory species, right? And this is a big smorgasbord, a big banquet of for all kinds of species. That should be accompanied by many different migratory birds at the same time. There used to be narwhales. Not. You know the tusked whales, the long tusked? They disappeared. And what a statement. They disappeared. They never went over here like the fin whales did. They disappeared. So these other more Arctic species have disappeared from the areas. And what is worrying is that is an interesting signal of climate change that happens there 5,000 kilometers away. And as I showed you earlier, climate change, heavy artificial man-made climate change itself is actually real. It's been going on for 80 years. And these invisible plumes are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And when you get a large substantial amount in your pristine glaciers, the ice can't crystallize anymore because it's pulsing energy every second, and there's so much of it. And the Buford affects the ecosystem in Greenland, because the ecosystem, the atmosphere, oceans and streams are all interconnected. And then this garbage can diagnosis where they talk about climate change, it bugs me. Okay, so here's the punchline. Arctic sea ice, and then seabird die-offs during the heavy nuclear testing. There was an event. In 2010, they're showing a seabird die-off that all of a sudden dwarfs everything else. Right? And they're going pre. That's just being scumbags about it. That's why they have the inner dot. It's right on 2011, right? And then all the way up to now, it's just major events is what they're showing. So you're getting the evidence from many different directions. Let's talk about something really strange. Dingoes. Dingo! World's cutest, most lethal predators. So in the last decade, there's been roughly 5 attacks on humans in Australia. I done some nosing around because I was trying to hunt down a story last weekend. And I spent most of my weekend looking up this stuff. I kept the page open. I kept trying to gathering it up. So it's a little confusing because I was learning, and you've seen this from me over many years. Sometimes I'll do that where I'm trying to understand a pattern, and I'm just grabbing the information as I'm going with the intentions of thinning it out later to tell the story. I guess what I didn't do. So let's get through it. Tourists in Queensland have been warned about the dangers of dingoes after multiple attacks on people. So I was really curious. I was like, well, that's something we're looking for. Species that are attacking humans with the theory that their species don't exist anymore and they're becoming predatory. And so this is the first one that I seen, probably like a lot of people when you first look at it, was these sunbathers, I believe from Germany, tourists in Australia. And this girl is in a bikini, and look, he bit her. He kind of like almost bit her there. See, he got his mouth open. And that you don't want an animal attacking you in that spot, because if you're a male, you know what they're going for, all right? That's the kill shot, see? And look at him. He just shot right in. Look at that. For the kill shot. He got chased away. And that's them there chasing it away. And the truck pulled up. They can inflict serious harm. And then I started coming across horror stories of people in the last 12 months. And there was a lot of it. This is better a video, I think, this one. I went back and done it. Where she jumps up, and that's going for a kill shot, folks. That's meant to mortally wound them, see? I see Buddy running and the dingo responding. And sometimes they're in large packs. So how many tourists disappear in Australia each year, I wonder? Because did this group, he got hit with a shovel, but did this group kill a few tourists and decided that became the norm? There was a jogger, and the dingo chased a joggo. What the hell is a joggo, Dana? Get with the program. I know, hang on. Doing 7 things one time here. Clash between, this is most of it's happening on this one big island. It's a big island. It's a major wild spot. But they're used to foraging on the low tide lines too, right? High tide lines. Officials say a 24-year-old woman was attacked by 3 or 4 dingoes that chased her out into the ocean, I believe. Quite a few, you see in a few seconds, quite a few it is. So they start putting up all kinds of warning signs because it'll really quick to take out a child. They rushed the victim off to, it was hard, like it was really hard when I went to mainstream media. It was really, really vague, the information about the attack. But when you went to small independent media, that's when you started learning about a pack attack. They showed her up, they bit her like 30 times or something. And also this child was 6 years old that they done it to. Same thing, and got rescued. They'll drown some of their prey in the water, and that's what they're doing with the children. And like everybody's there playing, and if you're not paying attention, you don't even realize it's happening. One of the kids are gone underwater. He chased the dingoes away. It was his kid. And a little boy, 8 years old, was the same thing. We'll get the stories coming up here in a second. Young 5-year-old suffered serious injuries to head, arms, and back. They're definitely attacking children. Now, I'm not saying this got anything to do with Fukushima in particular, but it's something we're definitely expecting to see, these patterns. In this case, because it's on a single island, that's the species, we know they got major die-offs all around Australia. This could very well be a result of the die-off of the migratory species that they no longer have access to, has made them pretty desperate. And the campground, they just closed that down a few days ago, by the way. And so there was this one girl, he chased her out into the ocean, and those people there, him and the girl and her boyfriend, were in this van. He had to get out and go out in the ocean, get her, and fight the dingoes back into the vehicle, where they tried to pull her out of the vehicle. And he done that with kids too, by the way. They won't give up, eh? And same thing with these people. They got these little kids. Don't want to let them out of your sight. They got to be right by you the whole time from here on out, because they're targeting. The majority of the targets are children, and you know, children run around. The dingoes these are killers, man. And they seem like a dog, see? And because summer was just starting, they were warning the kids. So this young girl was playing with these kids, and the dingo just went right out and tried to drown the kid. And she got bit up really good. Oh, let me go back. And that's them running. And that was two other parents were saying, well, we're not going to let our kids out of our arms till we get out of here. They should blew them away. The dingoes wouldn't give up, eh? They had to beat the dingoes off them because the dingo wanted the kids. So don't go walking, don't leave any food, put everything in garbage cans. Environment minister went out there, they're tagging, and then they don't really want to kill the dingoes. But I mean, that particular group of dingoes, if they learn that behavior, they don't unlearn it. And if you got all kinds of tourists, you're going to start, and you probably already have. You probably no doubt have missing tourists. They're not doing that. That's just not something new. This has been going on a while. We got the documentation. Do not feed or approach the dingoes. And a lot of people do, right? Child on a holiday attacked by 2 dingoes in a string of attacks. July the 3rd. All of these are this year, I think. I'm going to show you. 6-year-old recovering after being savaged by dingoes, right by her parents too. Her mother heroically fought off the dingo that was attacking her 2-year-old son. And so over the last decade, it was only 5. I found 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or so. Young girl attacked, child attacked, 10-year-old boy attacked, 2-year-old boy attacked, 5-year-old attacked. And the list goes on, right? 2 women attacked just a few days ago. 2 women. And they go for the kill shots, see? Because they're used to killing kangaroos and wombats and a few other species. That's their favorite target. And so if they're having problems, and you see the kids there, they decided kids are food. And because they're not finding their regular forage, you would find lots of vulnerable chicklets and babies and eggs from the migratory species. They're not getting that no more, see? And the government was handing out dingo sticks so you can beat off the predators while you're out getting a suntan. Here, honey, don't hit your brother with it. 600 dead Arctic tern chicks found in Northumberland. Yeah, failures of the colonies. We found 3, right? And we're in the biggest migratory spot on the entire planet. Instead of 500,000 or 1,000,000, we found 3. One of them looked like it was definitely lost, and the other 2 were hanging out on the same rock every day for a week. Low tide, the rock would show up, they would show up. I mean, they do their migratory runs for millions of generations. Thanks, Fukushima. We have picked up over 600 dead Arctic tern chicks from across the site, and we started to discover dead adults. So it's not just a failure of the young, it's a failure of the adults too. The number of dead on Fairy Island this year have been much lower, about 500, but the Trust said the numbers have increased in recent days, with Kittiwakes, black-headed gulls, guillemots, the most affected, the babies, the fledglings, the chicks. And they're checking for bird flu. They're dying of starvation. Air pollution particles may be cause a dramatic drop in global insect numbers. Global insect numbers. And they're the most vulnerable to radioactive fallout, which covered the entire planet. I don't know if I better mention that or not, but radiation covered the entire planet. This is France's model in just 16 days. So this model stops us 16 days later. That decimated the insects. That's what that done. And everything else in proxy that's dependent upon them. And it happens in increments over a decade or two, but after a couple of decades, you'll be lucky to have a picture of a bird anymore. Fade into the night, the fireflies are facing a threat from climate change and light pollution. But light pollution is not everywhere. It's only in a fraction of the landmass. And we see them, they do that a lot, especially Britain. Britain's notorious for stooping to low-level stuff. Firefly larvae are quite ferocious predators. Feed on worms and slugs and snails and mosquito larvae. We got lots of frogs here, but we got no predators feeding on them. Most of the little birds we got here are seed eaters, not insect eaters. Deny. Fair weather and insect populations worldwide are declining. Fair weather said. What a great last name, eh? Fair weather. They're going to blame it on climate change. The larvae are the unsung, unseen heroes of gardens and waterways because they keep the ecosystem clean. And fireflies use the light to find a mate. And there's 50 or 60 species, I think, of these fireflies in just our country, Canada, which is not really a country now, is it? It's the nuclear industry owns just lock, stock, and barrel. They removed all the restrictions on the food from the nuclear wasteland in Japan, the entire country, not the 14 prefectures that have been banned by 10 other countries. Canada didn't do that. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. So for 10 years, Japan couldn't ship it anywhere, basically, only to Canada, and they did. The worst of the worst, straight from the nuclear wasteland. And then everybody got sick in Canada since. It's okay, they're going to bring a bunch of immigrants and take care of us for the rest of our life, so we'll be fine. Because we won't be able to do shit because we've been poisoned. Warning of a possible plague of black flies because there's no predators, right? Insects best known for their aggressive bites. If you get rid of the predators, you start seeing, because normally they're feeder flies, right? The black flies, because there's so many of them. And there's a lot of insect-eating birds and frogs and trout and dragonflies and everything else are feeding on them, right? But if you decimate that, then because they're normally prolific in order to feed all the chicklets and all the other species, then they've run out of control. And so you're always looking for the feeder, again, the keystone species to explode with no predators, and that's a harbinger. More people affected by his bite. They got a nasty bite, those fellers. Can even require hospitalization. Experts note uptick in ringed seals' death. He's almost looking healthy. Or not. It certainly seems extreme to find 4 dead seals in a week, and it is likely due to the fact that the waters are starting to warm up. Again, this is an opinion, that's a conjecture. Mortality rates could, which is a conjecture, actually be much higher, as not all the seals are ever recovered. If you found 4, they assume 40 died or recorded. You only find 10%. That's the consensus worldwide. And it's not really a good one either. It's significantly worse than that. Fish and wildlife officials on the trail of outlaw otter. That's right, we got a rogue otter on our planet. Got a brazen young sea otter that has been harassing surfers and kayakers around Santa Cruz for more than 2 weeks. A thug, if I will. More than 50 pilot whales die after mass stranding on the Scottish Islands, and they are freaked out about this. They are, and the media said, "Oh no, that's normal." Yeah, since Fukushima, or nuclear weapons testing, there's a few incidences of it, but the majority, almost all of it, not everything, but the majority of it is post-Fukushima. Unassailable, incontestable. More than 50 pilot whales die after mass strandings. And they never seen that. The whales don't have pilot whales there. Like, what the fuck? They died where they were found Sunday morning. They were already dead, some of them were alive during the night and died the next day. They passed by 50 homeless on the way there, by the way. And it could be the largest fatal mass stranding event we've had in Scotland for decades. No, you never had it there before. They're still looking for the reason. Nothing to do with Fukushima. Remember the last year or the year before? They would always say the whales are not emaciated. A little bit, but they're not emaciated. Like Durnford saying. It could be the result of injuries and poor health or navigational area. Yeah, they could have Alzheimer's, dementia, and autism, Down syndrome. Because they'll get it. And Fukushima is ready to give it. The largest stranding of pilot whales was in 2011. Post-Fukushima. Total coincidence, of course. Last September, 200 post-Fukushima. Only 35 survived. Tasmania had, in 2020, post-Fukushima, 450 whales. Oh, I think we might actually have, besides 2 Danas, a video. I don't know if I do or not. We do that again. I can do better. Let me recenter this for you. Make it a bit more. Send your hate mail to Dana@.com. No, Dana, they weren't alive. That's Photoshop, folks. They'd have faked it all. Whales don't beach themselves. Watch the viral video of massive oarfish with mysterious openings spotted near Taiwan. That's a surreal picture right there, let alone a video, because they're very deep water fish. It's got a weird hole into it, I think this one. Yeah, this one does. With unusual openings, you'll see it in the next picture maybe. According to the divers, they measured as 6.5 feet in length. It's much smaller than the recorded maximum size of 36 feet. Look at the hole in it. one of the rarest fish in the ocean. They always say you got a better chance of seeing a unicorn than an oarfish in real life. And this one was a very young one with mysterious holes that looks almost natural, don't they? They couldn't figure out what the hell they were looking at. That's their flashlight shining, see that? Now you got to touch it and pet it. I wouldn't be petting anything that is not in the diving books, folks. They're typically found at 600 to 3,000 feet. More than 50 whales died after mass strandings in Scotland. We just covered it. By 3:30 p.m., it was decided the remaining whales should be exterminated. And pilot whales grow to about 4 meters in length and live for 40 to 60 years. The species is known for mass strandings. Yeah, and so is humpback whales and fin whales and killer whales, of course, and right whales and gray whales, beak whales and sperm whales and there's a whole bunch of them, right? Not just pilot whales, you degenerate scum. Oh, what's this? He's pretty fat looking. He probably never died of emaciation. Look at him. Oh, that's right. He's emaciated as you get. Considering how long the pilot whale has been out of the water, in addition to the poor conditions, decided he should be killed for the greater good of martinis, cocktail parties later that day. Over 50 whales found dead, and the worst mass stranding in the areas. It's the biggest ever in Scotland with 55 dead. Oh, here's the beluga stories. I jumped. My apologies. Let me go back and see where that starts. Right there. Loss of sea ice putting migrating beluga whales in danger. This was pretty fascinating, folks. They're following the Great Migratory. Every July, around 57,000 beluga whales make their way from the Arctic to the warmer waters south. Now, I'll tell you another story before we get into this too far. Every year, 46 million birds make a migratory right across my doorstep. Guess how many I found this year? 3. Not 300, not 3,000, not 300,000, not 3 million out of 46 million, but 3. If I can ever get back out there, I think we'll come up, something will happen. Tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow they're going to take the transfer. They asked, of course, permission because they're really good. And taking a transfer case out is a big deal, right? So that's going to be another 4 hours of labor. But we got no choice. We got to figure out what the hell is going on there. The truck is in amazing shape, except for it's been beat to shit for years and years and years doing these research expeditions and has come back to haunt us. Oh, man. What a friggin' disaster this has been again this year. At least we got 16 expeditions in so far, right? I'm just going to deal with it. Just repair it and find it and figure it out and get it working and move on, get out and get some research for the years out. The big thing is, like, all the other groups, they would have just went and rented a truck and kept going, right? We don't have that luxury. Around 3,000 of the polar bears are emaciated here in Canada. This is a polar bear eating a beluga carcass. And they had this video on a loop. I wasn't sure. I thought it was live streaming. And that's the boat. They're on a telescopic lens. And then they were live streaming it at their site. I was trying to figure it out. Just another one of those moments. He goes away, then he comes back and says, "Frigate." I couldn't get the taste of it. And this sailboat traveling with 57,000 beluga whales, but I don't see the evidence of the 57,000. Same as I don't see the evidence of the 46 million migratory birds that are coming through here right now that I can't find anywhere. All of our ponds are empty too, not a single bird. And another thing, I don't know if I mentioned this recently, was that the ducks that we're finding, we're not seeing any babies. Because there's a number of spots where we found ducks and residential that are out in the ocean, in the estuaries, and that the protected estuaries we got here. I never seen no babies, ducks whatsoever. Let's keep it rolling. Let's check the poll right quick, actually. Is Fukushima nuclear reactors meltdowns and the 8 melted fuel pools the catalyst behind the extinction event that we're looking at? I think it's safe to say. And you can see the beluga whales blowing bubbles. And a good time is had by everybody. Vanishing whales decline worse than previously thought, says the feds. The North Atlantic right whale numbers are less than 350, declining for several years post-Fukushima. And declared the whales decline an unusual mortality event, which means an unexpected significant die-off. Started in 2000. They acknowledged in 17. Doesn't mean it didn't happen before that. It just means they finally caved in. So there's an extra 16 considered dead with only a 350 population worldwide. Because 36 of the 114 whales included in the estimate had died. A lot of them migrated up into St. Lawrence, where they've never been before. And they're there each year. They should normally be off Halifax and Boston. And because the agency cautioned only about a third of the right whales are documented, the total number of dead or injured could be much higher. Interesting statement, injured. I hate media. I'm poisoned with their lies and their propaganda and their slick deceit. Dead seabirds washed, birds with suspected, which is an opinion, avian influenza wash up on the Mannix's beaches, right? And this, I say, well, you can't touch them. You can't let your kids or your pets go near them. And like, honey, we can't go down because the bird flu is there. Mommy, why can't we go to the beach? Oh, I want to go to the beach. Oh, because the bird flu. Oh, the damn bird flu. Bloody humans. It's very effective, by the way, because they got the media at their fingertips. And they got the keys to YouTube and Facebook and everything else. And all I can do is work myself to the ground to tell the story. So at least there's somebody out there. Last week, a significant number of dead birds, predominantly guillemots, were also found onshore in the south and west of the Isles of Man, which is a nuclear wasteland from Sellafield, right? United Kingdom. A further 67 birds thought to have died or be dying for avian influenza washed up in the Mannix beaches, but they could have died of starvation. They could have died of bad haircuts. They could have died crossing the road. Bird flu kills dozens of cats in Poland. What's happening? Well, you're all sending your animals to the same government laboratory and they're hoodwinking you. And the second that you put the World Health Organization into the equation, you lose all credibility. This is the military-industrial complex. That's UN. They are the root of everybody's problem. They've been around pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki's the League of Nations. They changed their name after to celebrate the nuclear detonations to United Nations. And the first thing they done was barbarize North Korea with more munitions than they fired on the entire World War II on that little tiny country. And then land, sea, and air embargoes for 70 years. And you kicked it off by burning down every village, every community, every town, and every city with napalm. War crime after war crime, and called it a police action, no less. And who was North Korea at that time? Well, they were slaves of Japan for 50 years. They were occupied. At Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they stopped the occupation. United Nations came in and said, no, not so quick. And they've been using them as the boogeyman now for 70 years. Officially, this year is 70 years, right? Of 25 cats, 2 were outdoors cats. 18 were indoor with access to a balcony. The terrorists were a backyard, and 5 were indoor cats with no access. This is from the propaganda machine itself. You'll be pretty gullible after everything I showed for anybody to give them credibility ever again. Likely result in the death of hundreds of thousands and millions of marine birds. Study finds marine heat wave, and they don't explain how a heat wave, they call it climate change, but the heat wave is it's easy to understand the heat wave if you're a little bit honest. Even a little tiny bit. Let me explain that very quickly. If you acknowledge that the buildings don't exist, instead of playing along and pretending it does, like they're doing, but if you acknowledge that it actually doesn't exist, then you have to acknowledge that these models from these major institutions and academic studies are real. And there's a good chance they're real because the buildings don't exist. And that's capable of causing this extinction level event to play out. Seabirds in the Pacific Northwest, from cormorants to storm petrels and Cassini auklets, are at risk of mass die-offs from a warming ocean. Like, they're throwing everything at it except for Fukushima. Just throwing shit at the wall, looking for something to stick and say, aha, see, shit sticks to the wall. Between 2014 and 2019, there was 5 mass die-offs. It was a lot more than that. During the events, the birds died of diseases and starvation. Well, they don't get disease if they're healthy. They got disease because they were emaciated, which degenerates linked to a warmer ocean caused by the elimination of the phytoplankton and the emissions itself into the environment for 80 years, the dumping into the ocean for 30 years straight, and this incredible litany of releases from 440 reactors. Each one got 2 fuel pools hemorrhaging all day, splitting the atoms into the environment. The hidden lies of discussing nuclear, like a catastrophic storm hitting without fail every year. And it kept happening year after year. And we documented, we were on the ocean. There was no species. There was no migratory species for the birds to chase. There was nothing in the tidal zones for the bird to eat. There was no alternative. And I showed that at the first part of the show tonight. The study included more than 90,000 surveys of 106 seabird species on more than 1,000 beaches. I'd done more than 1,000 beaches myself for 6 years. 4 to 5 months a year. And so the marine heat wave can create harmful algae blooms. Of course it can, because there's no opposition, right? Many birds can starve to death because food sources like fish and plankton become scarce. That's because of perpetual radioactive fallout. Dolphin rams and the swimmers at Popular Beach in Japan. A lot of perverts in Japan. That could have been a victim we're talking about. 4 swimmers were left injured in a separate dolphin attack in a single day at a beach. That's going to be the same one. Dolphin broke the ribs of one guy. 3 or 4 broken ribs and bites to his hand. Yeah, if you've ever been up close to a dolphin, you wouldn't want to mess with it. Photos of a dead creature on Brackley Beach, PEI, causes a stir. And obviously that's a porpoise or what? I can't remember. Look again. I'm assuming that's a porpoise anyway, or a dolphin rather. Mystery of a humpback whale found dead in the Amazon jungle. Nobody knows how it got there. That's such a great story. There's another team studying it, because it happened a couple of years ago, I believe, didn't it? So far, we don't know how it died, let alone how it ended up in the mangrove, and that's several years later. The local newspaper suggested the whale could have died from eating plastic, which is just a garbage can diagnosis to do. Along with this astonishing feat, we were baffled as what a humpback whale is doing on the north coast of Brazil during February, because this is an unusual occurrence. During February. It's not supposed to be there, period. You don't travel to the north. We have tons of these examples that we've never seen pre-Fukushima, just post-Fukushima. The whales aren't supposed to be there. They migrate to the Antarctic, not to that desolate area. Oh, let me go backwards. Screwed up. Witch doctor blamed for killing 100 vultures at a safari park. Fucking maniacs, man. Just maniacs, eh? I know where I can get some vultures. Come back tomorrow. Abracadabra. They believe the witch doctor had poisoned the buffalo to lure down the vultures in order to get their beaks, their heads, and claws to use in their potions. I'm always a little bit shocked when I see 2 Danas. Just kidding you. Everything has its order, so to speak, right? These traditional healers believe that they take the potion can get clairvoyant abilities. They believe it can increase their intelligence and cure terminal illness. When the AIDS epidemic, after Pfeiffer had something like 3 million doses of liquid children's aspirin, or 30 million, I can't remember, doses of these liquid children aspirins. Or it was Bayer's, I'm sorry. And let me see if I can find, I might even have the video here. And so instead of getting rid of, that was contaminated with AIDS, liquid aspirin. I had no idea how that happened. So instead of destroying it, the executives decided to ship it to China, Africa, and I can't remember the other, it was another really impoverished country. And China executed the executives that done it, but they caused an AIDS epidemic. And so the natives in Africa came to the conclusion that if you had sex with a virgin, it would cure the AIDS. And so nothing was safe. They even found a puppy at the dog pound with a condom up there. You know what? Okay, just hang on. This is mainstream media stuff I'm talking about. No hope in hell of finding that. That's on one of the other hard drives, I would imagine. One more try. No, I'm not going to find it. Because I got the story there somewhere. Anyway, let's keep going. We're already barely getting... Well, we're basically through the show. We only got... I got a bit left, I guess, but let's keep going. I got to watch out because I got so much to get through. I shouldn't be looking for anything else. Joy went on to explain the ecological impact of situations used. Vultures alongside the scavengers play an important role in the environment by getting rid of disease carcasses so they don't turn into diseases for other species, right? Beachgoers warned to stay away after another 30-foot dead whale washes up in the Kent shores just days after 55 pilot whales in Scotland, right? There was another one washed up. Sorry. Believed to be a minke whale was discovered last night in St. Mary's Bay. Freaked up, eh? Just days after 55 whales stranded on a Scottish beach, and that never seen that before in their history. No definite reason for the stranding has been given. The scientists have discovered a high number of females in the pod were pregnant, with several in the process of giving birth. I'm looking at emaciated whales with clear emaciation, clear peanut heads, and the two facing us. I mean, they're not really big whales, but we've got the documentation of them from here, right? We went 800 kilometers in a snowstorm because of 15 whales on the beach in a little community that was there. Turned out it was there. When we got there, we found out the whales were there for 36 days. And the children didn't want to go to school because their school bus went past the dead whales each day. They were having nightmares at night. Which meant about 150 had died. Generally, 400 to 600 strandings are reported in the UK every year post-Fukushima. These are scumbags when they say that. That's a scumbag tactic to not acknowledge that facet of it, right? I really disrespect Australia and United Kingdom agencies and governments and organizations. They're unbelievable. The media is mentioning them in this context. They're scumbags. I've done this many times, by the way, this kind of diving. Never did like the squid, I gotta admit. Warmer ocean temperature spawns California market squid bloom. There's no predators. See? It's an incredibly important commercial species. Yeah, you have no idea, apparently. It's an unbelievable amount of species dependent upon the squid. I didn't know that basking sharks were warm-blooded, like cows. Or it's like finding cows have wings. They're very slow. When I was really young, like 13 or 14, I had a little 10-foot speedboat with a brand new 15 Johnson. Pride and joy, actually. Because back in those days, that was really special. Everything was basically the 3 Acadian putt-putts. You have to wind up and putt, and push you along at about 3 kilometers, right? But here I was, a little flat-bottom, 10-foot long speedboat on the North Atlantic Ocean, and have this 15 horsepower Johnson. And I was out breaking the engine in the harbor, and there was 2 of these basking sharks in the harbor, and I didn't see them till the last second, so I pulled the motor up and ran over them. I didn't realize that we didn't have any libraries or anything like that. I just seen them as sharks. And I come flying back in. Holy shit. Oh my God, I almost got eaten by sharks. And they're totally benign 99.9% of fish and sharks are cold-blooded. Like the nuclear scientists, cold-blooded. There's a heat wave in the sea and scientists are worried. It's not a heat wave, it's a catastrophic event. It's a catastrophic man-made, foreseeable event. And was done to us, the entire species and the planet, on purpose. My contempt for the nuclear industry knows no bounds anymore. Thousands of penguins wash up dead on the Uruguay coast. Get back up to here. Thousands of penguins. So how many didn't wash up, I wonder? But 2,000 washed up on the coast of eastern Uruguay in the past 10 days. The cause is a mystery. And bird flu was ruled out by environmental authorities. In other words, they starved to death. Because they don't look healthy, right? There is mortality in the water. 90% are young specimens that arrive without fat reserves and empty stomachs. Emaciated, period. So they arrived, and don't use the word emaciated, without fat reserves. So if you got an empty stomach, the next thing is you eat up the fat in your body, and then you die, right? And we see this over the last several years, consistent. So they starved to death. Why would you even take samples? Well, because the system is set up that you got to try to blame the avian flu first before you can say anything about. They also found dead storm petrels, albatrosses, seagulls, sea turtles, sea lions. There was around 4,500 sea lions, 3,500 rather sea lions are covered at the beginning of the show, that he said died of the bird flu in Peru. But it wasn't. They were completely emaciated. It's even hotter underwater. Now we see that on our sonar, right, when we're out doing the research here lately, that the water temperatures are mad. It's absurd. In the Atlantic. And that the official story was, well, when summer started, after a week of summer, then the ocean just magically heated up. It's never done that in the history of humankind. And we were out in May when it was still cold, but the ocean was hot. The industry is disgusting how much it lies and the type of lies that it tells. But it's a perfect storm for, you get a hurricane come in, and this hurricane season, and it's on that hot water. What do you think that's going to be this year? We're going to be looking at a lot of storms, hurricanes, and typhoons and cyclones coming ashore at over 200 miles per hour, and we don't have any infrastructure that can handle that wind. I hope I'm wrong. I know I'm not, but I hope I'm wrong. Northern Norway suffers serious bird flu outbreak. Oh, cases of it going from different countries, and foxes and seals, minke whales. That's a new one. I've never heard minke whales. Scum knows no reserve, do they? There's 300 dead birds. It's reasonable to assume there have been several thousand birds, and this is the largest outbreak of the bird flu in Norway. It was just joined NATO, I might add. Degenerate NATO, which if you look up their website, it says 300 or 30 militaries. So NATO was created in response to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was dissolved, NATO 100% should have been dissolved. Oceans off where I'm currently are the greatest temperature increase in North America, in the cold Atlantic. Water surface temperatures are increasing following a week of heat and humidity. The ocean doesn't work that way. You can't just heat the ocean up with a fucking blowtorch after a week. Excuse the language. And get a little irritable with the lies. I'll switch gears. We're getting close to being through this. Dozens of pilot whales dead after a mass stranding in Australia. More than 50 have died after stranding on a remote beach in Australia. And as I showed you earlier, at least 7 different species doing the same thing. 100 long-finned. And do they have menopause? I can't remember. Or was it just a short-finned? More than half died overnight. The unusual behavior of whales could be an indication of a stress, because that's their migratory route where they're going to turn around eventually and head back, right? And when they don't find the food there after struggling, right, because they're biologically driven. They're like a homing pigeon. There's nothing they can do about it. They're driven to go there, and there's no food. There's no resources. Mass strain. This picture is stunning. I don't really remember seeing that before. Where they gathered offshore before they went in and beached themselves, folks. That just gives me the shivers every time I look at these pictures. It's just like, my goodness, what have we got done? And this was pilot whales storming a beach. Watch this. Oh, it'll come up in a little bit. The next one, maybe we'll get to it. Bowhead whales may be pregnant up to 23 months. Like they can pick when they're going to have the baby, to find the right spot and then enough food, and then they'll have the baby, kind of a... And they can live up to 200 years too, right? Yeah, they're poisoning everything. West Coast grey whale population still declining, but signs of recovery begin to slow. Show rather. There's no signs. They're all emaciated, for God's sakes. So now it's not down 40%, it's 46%. And we found 2,000 dead since last year. It was average around 1,400 a year, right? It is climate change, just the garbage can diagnosis. More and more whales, and they're seeing more whales in better body condition. The females are in poor body condition. Let's keep it rolling here. Less than nearly 100 pilot whales beached on Australia coasts are exterminated. And they threw a lot at it, right? But this is extraordinary, what you're looking at, picture. I'll get out of the way. That's extraordinary stuff. Every time they set them out, the survivors would come right back in again. I'll get some better pictures in a second coming up. Just hang on here. There we go. That is like unbelievable, isn't it? See that one in the middle that stands out? You probably noticed that one up there. He's got his or her body in a different position. I was like trying to highlight it. There it is right here. And now it's up there. That's the only one that's not uniform, right? That stands out. Hang on. This is just before they committed the ultimate sacrifice. Controversy surrounds Fukushima water. Controversy. 2 young humpback whales found dead in the Panamanian waters. Hong Kong's whale must be given the respect it deserves. Yeah, tell the truth for a change, you scumbags. Stop being scumbags. Oh, he's just a little bit emaciated, Dana. Holy shit, eh? That's some serious emaciation right there, man. That's the first recorded stranding in India as part of that coastline. It's 32 feet long, only weighed 5 tons. Should have weighed around 25 or 30 tons for that size. Pelicans are disappearing in the Great Lakes, Salt Lakes. We average around 10 to 12,000 breeding adults, and this number has dropped drastically this year. The first aerial counts were 2,500 to 3,000 birds. Since that time, all of them have succumbed to exposure or just been predated on. They didn't see a single pelican. A lot of dead chicks and eggs. Oh, by the way, none of the birds tested had avian influenza. Scumbag nuclear, man. 46,000-year-old worm comes back to life after thaw. That's reassuring. That's right out of a horror movie, isn't it? Pretty amazing, though. It was frozen for 46,000 years. In 46,000 years, Henry Kitchener will probably wake up. Piece of shit that he is. 3 dead minke whales found along the Maine coast since the end of July. Over a 6-day period. That's crazy. No, they're not connected. 3 minke whales shows up in the same area over 6 days. No, not connected. It was getting stranded because it was emaciated. It was searching for food. These guys are maniacs, eh? Pilot whales at Flamborough monitored over stranding fear. They've seen some pilot whales, and they figured naturally they're going to commit suicide. There were 30 whales. They were huddling and more anxious behavior, which is often seen before they strand. No, this is the first time we've seen it. They're not even supposed to be in the North Sea. At one point, they were swimming towards the beach, so everybody panicked. Hopeful signs of declining population of grey whales along the west coast. Look at the peanut head on this feller. Holy shit. So they estimated how many died? $15,000 dead, which works out to $2,500 a year in their numbers. Unusual mortality event. Theorized the decline is partly related to the starvation. 3 grey whales found along the Washington shore last month showed signs of malnutrition, which is another word for emaciation. Just say it like it is. The near extinction in the 1950s due to commercial hunting, and the species numbers in We're up 13,000, but that was hunting. This is radiation, so they're not going to recover. They're suggesting they were low back then, but that was from hunting. This is totally different. They're not dying from hunting. Alaska Science Forum, population of Yukon River peregrine nosedives. And it was a lack of food, I believe. Number of adult peregrine falcons in the upper Yukon River decreased by 1/3 in the last 3 years. Used to have 58 to 60 nesting pairs, 1 or 2 single adults. In 2023, we had 33 pairs and 11 single adults. That's quite the discrepancy, eh? So the recent decline is different from the DDT, which was the old decline, because the crazies were spraying DDT in schools where the children were in class, for God's sakes. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that a hideous looking baby? But it's amazing when it grows up. Found no dead birds to test for avian flu. What a low-life thing to say, eh? Norway is failing its seabirds. I can see the bottom. It's not that far away. Another 10 minutes at the most. I'm going to do a shout out here at the end of the show tonight. See how long I can make the video. Keep track of my... Holy shit, it's 12:55. That's what I get because I missed Sunday's night show. I'm too burnt out. And because we got so much on the go, I can't keep up with it. And then... It's been a hellish week so far. It's not far from over yet. I'm hoping we come up with a solution tomorrow for at least a diagnosis of what's going on. And then if we got to, we'll come up with a solution, right? But hopefully they can fix it. It didn't seem good, though, at the end of the day when he said to me, it's not your transmission, but I believe it's your transfer case. And this is what I said from the get-go, by the way. But I'm not an expert. So they used the proper equipment, right? They had it hooked up to the laptop, and they had 2 mechanics out there joyriding around. I'm paying for both of them. 15,000 kittiwakes have died in the past 3 weeks. Recently, several species of terns, gulls, skuas, cranes, pelicans died en masse in Europe. And blame it on the bird flu. Everything gets blamed on the bird flu. Trees are dying, bird flu. I seen a meteorite hit the planet the other day. No, that was bird flu. Killed that meteorite. Population Yukon River birds nosedive. Heffley Lake loons are in danger. Annual bird count finds. The loons, oh, you got a baby on his back. The loons are the apex predators for freshwater divers. And they only eat about 1 kilogram a day or something, which is, I guess, a lot. But they are considered the apex for eating fish and frogs and stuff like that. They nest in the same locations for as many years as possible, fighting other loons to protect their claims. So this is millenniums of generations in the same place. The chicks are fed from a single lake during their rearing, indicating whether a lake is healthy. Well, I've checked around 300 lakes here that are isolated, and there's nothing in them. I would give my left nut and right eyeball to get a picture like that. Okay, well, maybe not my left nut, but and so this is a bunch of pilot whales going into a slipway because there's nowhere for them to beach, and they just run up on a slipway. And I mean, they're coming in full speed. They're going to ram it right up on the beach. Imagine being there and seeing that happen. And a covert beaked whale, which should be, as far as I know, under an unusual mortality event, considering the numbers of them that have died over the last couple of years, was seen grieving a baby for an extended period, for many days. It's the first time grieving behavior had been documented in the beaked whale, which are normally a very secretive whale. They're a deep diving whale. It's very rare to have that intuition because they're so rarely studied, right? 3 dead whales in 4 days. 3 dead whales in 4 days. I wish one of them would lend me one of their motors. Get some fucking research done. 68 whale deaths since 2022 raises questions over offshore wind power impact. Like the offshore wind power has been around for decades. We've never had an event. Right, this is artificially inflated by the pro-nuclear community. And that whale is emaciated. You can tell just looking at it. Oh, it's Michael Schellenberg, for God's sakes. Might have known. But he's a disgusting, despicable, hideous pro-nuclear scumbag. He's a lobbyist, a nuclear lobbyist. And they called him a journalist, I believe, in that story, was it? Hang on. Yeah, journalist. That's rich. Michael Schellenberg, a journalist. Malnutrition is likely cause of the spate of whale strandings. Whale deaths by ship strikes is around 1,200 since 1978. Artificially inflating them by claiming that a percentage of them are dying of ship strikes. The ones that are being shown up are emaciated. They died, they're floating around, they're easy targets for a ship. That's why that's happening. Normally they'll just get out of the way, right? Oh, we're not to the end of it. And so the truck is in the garage. We're way down, we're in the hole, might as well go the rest of the way. Gonna be a doozy tomorrow, I bet you, when I get the bill. I don't care as long as we can come up with a solution. If it gets too bad, we're gonna have to do a fundraiser, which we haven't been able to do with this new site because they got rid of my normal site with no strikes on my account. We're going to do a shout out. We're going to close the poll. I'll let you folks get on with your night here as quick as we can, but might as well do a shout out. Where's the poll? Is Fukushima nuclear radiation the catalyst? 4 nuclear meltdowns, 8 fuel pools, the catalyst behind the extinction level event we're seeing. I think the evidence is unbelievably clear, undeniably, unassailably clear. And if you join it later in the video, you didn't see the absurd amount of evidence that I gathered up and used for the first part. I think we went through 1,300, 1,400 clicks here tonight. Normally it's 300. Bringing it. Dana's bringing it for the last show of the week. Last show of the week deserves, when it comes to the species, right? So let's end the poll. Let's do a shout out. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the other side. Let me do a shout out while we're here, because we're already in for it for 3 hours, not a few moments. Good night, everybody. Don Vincent. James Lucid. Hi, James. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Thank you again. Good night, everybody. Gabriel Tree Roof. These are very long shows, and I apologize if that's the pile. We got to get rid of it because it gathers up again fairly quickly, right? Port Angeles. Good night, everybody. See everybody on the other side. Chelsea MC. Hi, Chelsea. Albert. Radish. Nobby. Good night, everybody. Now, Stephen Young is out there. I know Colette is out there somewhere. I know what I know. Yeah, I've seen some bald eagles lately, Paul, man. That's right. Kevin Blanche was by. Hi, Kevin. Just gonna zip up through the comments. We're going backwards, and we'll come back and we'll call it a night. And a weekend, actually. We'll be back on Sunday if I don't burn myself out. And if Stephen Young is out there, yeah, because we missed Sunday, so we done long shows, a couple of long shows this week to make up for it. I think we done pretty good. John Curtis. My eyes are actually hurting at this stage. Yeah, radioactive dingo. Excellent. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody on the next one, which is coming on Sunday at the same time as this one started. Have a great night. Thank you for finding the time, the courage, and the energy. You're unusual people in an unusual time. And you're the most informed on the entire planet, bar nobody. And we'll see you on Sunday. Have a great night and a great week, and hugs for everybody. Take care, folks.